Hello and welcome to Six Pack. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Deku became the Hawkeye? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
The night was cool, and the only thing cooling exposed limbs was a light wind. However, that was not a concern for him. Even though the wind kept ripping off the tape and causing his hood to fall back, he was still reasonably warm thanks to his Kevlar vest and the hoodie he wore underneath it. As he leapt from building to building, twin tags of green fabric flapped off the back of the hoodie. The bow he was holding occasionally came up to shoot a zipline arrow, allowing him to swing across wider openings. When he heard a scream, he dove into an alley, taser arrows catching on to two thugs attempting to mug a high school girl. Arrows knocked and flying before his boots even touched the ground. He slid past, plucking his arrows out of their backs, and they fell to the ground. As he held the startled girl, he said, "Evening, nice night for a walk, eh?" Mystified, she said, yeah, I thought so, too. Ooh, is that Giorgino's? They make the best sub sandwiches." The bag of meatball subs she had purchased for herself and her friends caught the girl's attention. Yeah, I'm partial to the Philly cheesesteak. Teriyaki chicken man, myself, he said with a laugh as he stood up. He tilted his head and gave her a quick smile. Before she could say anything, he launched another zipline and was flying toward the closest roof, losing him in the darkness. "Welp, cops are coming, so I got a jet," he exclaimed. She was fortunate to do so because she would have witnessed him crash into the wall's side before clambering to the roof. Before he started to celebrate, the 13-year-old moaned, so uncool, as he took off. "I did it. I took down thugs. I can do this," he exclaimed before his foot slid on a pipe he had been attempting to use as a foothold, sending him crashing into an alleyway. "Maybe," he moaned as he climbed to the roof after removing himself from the pile of trash cans that had broken his fall. A bow was used to begin. The wood had been polished by the numerous hands it had experienced over the years, making it old. The grip was new except for the leather and string. The only striking items for the forgotten clutter in a second-hand store. And for some reason, Izuku purchased it for 500 yen when he was 8 years old, along with the arrow sheath. He then proceeded directly to Takoba Beach and practiced the bow until he could shoot it with some degree of accuracy. His fingers were split from the punishment of working the string. His forearm was raw from the numerous times the string had slammed into it, and the pain was so intense that it nearly made him cry. A few arrows were scattered around, and 5 arrows were stuck in a loose bunch as he stood proudly, tears running down his cheeks. Izuku Midoriya first genuinely thought he could be a hero without a quirk on that day. Additionally, it was the first time he and his mother had a disagreement. When he appeared hurt, clutching a bow and declaring he would be a hero, things swiftly got out of hand. When he hadn't arrived at the time he usually did, she had been inconsolable, and when he arrived injured, her anxiety had escalated into full-blown panic. A bow was really dangerous, which is why they were fighting, and without a quirk, how could he be a hero? The mother and son argued back and forth. Inko didn't want her son to be hurt, but Izuku was sure he could pass the exam with the bow and his mother only needed to believe in him. By the end of the evening, both were sobbing and embracing one another, with Izuku sobbingly vowing to be careful with her son's training and Inko promising to support him. For roughly 5 years, he was. Being the only member of the school's archery club, he founded it and soon rose to the position of team captain. He spent hours each day practicing with school bows, and he even took first place in a couple of the competitions he entered. He said he accomplished this with the assistance of his PE coach, who frequently dozed off during his practices and competitions, as well as a few students who only reluctantly signed up to help Izuku fulfill the club's legal requirements and compete in tournaments. They missed all of their shots and left early every time. Izuku always won gold. Because Bakugo believed that Izuku had finally abandoned his illogical desire to be a hero, he had stopped tormenting him because of these tournaments. Izuku was training after school, cleaning Takoba Beach for strength training, joining an MMA gym to improve his martial arts skills, and other things that the blonde bomber was unaware of. And searching tech forums online for assistance with his arrows. He asked questions about further weaponizing the arrows on the forums because he knew that using the pointed arrows he could buy at the stores would not be enough to make him a hero. At first, he had little traffic. Rather, the post was dominated by indifferent remarks like, "Why would you want to do this anyways?" and, "Maybe make a taser?" After that, he was inundated with inquiries from Mighty Tech 0001, who not only enthusiastically provided him with blueprints, lists of supplies, and ideas for his arrows, but also fully endorsed the notion of a hero without any peculiarities. He eagerly and swiftly encountered yet another challenge: obtaining the funds to purchase the supplies. In order to make his first batch of arrows, he had to make the painful decision to sell off a few figurines from his All Might collection. However, over the next few years, he would discover that all but the most valuable pieces were being sold to meet the demand for his technology. He had a few archery trophies and awards by the time he was 12. After nearly 5 years of testing and proofing, his arrows were almost flawless. He had even thoroughly cleaned Takoba Beach, giving him access to immaculate white sands for training. However, it never seemed sufficient. He had to wait patiently because he had the resources, the training, and the will to be a hero, but he was still 3 years away from Ua. Stalling. He desired to be more, to do more. However, how? On his way home from a tournament, he unintentionally stopped a robbery, which provided the solution. With his bow in hand and his mind absorbed in the cadence of his steps, he was tinkering with its string, concerned that it was frayed from the mistreatment he had subjected it to. "Let me go." Izuku's eyes instantly soared upward, gazing down a nearby alleyway where a man was attempting to yank a bag away from a girl with blonde hair. Without thinking, his hands moved instinctively and more quickly than most people could notice. He only needed 3 arrows, none of which were his special ones, but the man was pinned to the wall before the girl's backpack crashed down on top of his head because the sharp points of the arrows easily caught the seams of his clothing. When the girl turned to thank her savior, she saw that the alley was empty. "Phew. That was close, thank you," she trailed off. "Hello?" Meanwhile, Izuku had already arrived at his apartment, running into his room, locking the door, and mentally freaking out. "I just beat a villain, my god. I took on the role of vigilante. I might be taken into custody," he thought in a near-crying, blind panic. Ua would never tolerate something like this. His life was over. The majority of the weekend was spent in fear that the police would storm into his room and take him into custody. However, on Monday, nobody showed up, nothing was said, and the robber he had apprehended received hardly more than a footnote, a small column in the newspaper. When the fear of being arrested subsided, excitement replaced it. He had easily defeated a villain with little harm to himself or others. He reasoned that this should be the end of it and that he shouldn't try to eliminate any more villains. Izuku couldn't be bothered to even try to listen to it, though, as his logical mind wasn't in control at the moment, and he swung through the alleys, awkwardly rolling and diving between rooftops. Just as a nearby convenience store's front door was blown off its hinges by fleeing villains, he leapt over a street. The 3 of them laughed uncontrollably as they dragged an ATM and register with them. Once more, Izuku failed to think. Taser arrows slammed into the backs of the smaller 2 as he darted down into the street, electrocuting them and sending them tumbling across the street as their momentum continued. The arrow struck the 3rd, but it bounced off the thick hide-like skin. The man roared, "Donnie! Fletch!" and spun around to look at Izuku, who was blinking in shock that the man wasn't down. His voice was small as he said, "I'm sorry." The newly dubbed vigilante rolled out of the way and let loose multiple more taser arrows, each of which bounced off the man's skin as the giant roared, "I'll tear you apart, brat." As he charged down the street, he swung his fist and struck Izuku in the chest, sending him flying into the store. "I can tank blows from All Might," he exclaimed. "Your little needles won't do shit." Izuku turned over and moaned as he peered up at the cashier, who was concealed behind the counter. He said, "You got Sprite?" with a feeble smile that vanished the moment he felt a huge hand seize his ankle. Izuku moaned, "Oh man," before being hauled from the wreckage and flung across the street once more. This time, he fell to his feet and fired another arrow, which the villain caught. He started to say, "I told you, this shit don't," but was interrupted when purple gas began to shoot out of the end, striking him squarely in the face and making him cough. He went from saying, "What the fuick," to wheezing and collapsing to his knees and then to his face. Izuku sassed, limping slightly, and said, "I got more than tasers, you know," retrieving the arrows once more, securing the villains, and limping away before the police could arrive. This time, he ascended a fire escape and sat on the roof of the building, squirming as he cautiously unzipped his jacket and Kevlar vest to examine the unsightly bruise that was beginning to appear on his stomach. "That's gnarly," he sighed, peering over the edge where Backdraft and Death Arms were chatting with the cashier and assisting police in securing the villains. The cashier explained loudly enough for Izuku to hear, "Why yeah, the guy who did this just came streaking out of the sky. Took him out before they knew he was there. Bigger guy gave him some trouble but he knocked him out with some gas." Death Arms questioned, "His quirk was knockout gas?" "No, he was using trick arrows, he was a dead shot with that thing." Izuku slowly zipped up his uniform and stood up, preening at the compliment. Making a name for myself, he proudly whispered. Then, yeah, I got a video of him. He looks like a bunny rabbit. Bunny rabbit? Everyone below him looked up at his irate cry, and he froze as flashlights lit up his body and multiple cameras swung up to capture him on camera. Ah, I prefer more of a Midwestern hair, he concluded with a sheepish chuckle. Gotta go by. Izuku was fleeing before Death Arms or Backdraft could take any action, swiftly fading out of sight. Oh man, that was close, he exclaimed. Might be enough for tonight. Help. Izuku sighed as he dropped into the next alley, or not. He had prevented 5 muggings, 2 robberies, and an assault in progress by the end of the night without even having to reveal his identity. 1 boxing glove arrow and the man was dead. With his equipment stored on the roof in case it was needed, he was now entering his room in silence. He couldn't help but smile as he padded silently into the bathroom to shower. Tonight, he had been a hero. No fuss, no license. And he was eager to repeat it. 2 days later, school resumed, and he spent both nights on the streets, using different routes and paths through the city in case a hero decided to follow him too soon. Fortunately, he avoided encountering any other heroes and managed to prevent more crimes than he had on the first night. He was boldly facing villains because of his newly discovered confidence. However, Izuku was shocked to discover that many people were chatting and whispering about him when it was time for school. Sort of him, anyway. Did you hear about the new vigilante? Yeah, dude's been taking down criminals like crazy. That video where he took down the South Street gang. Completely crazy, right? They got a good look at him after that, didn't they? Yeah, he just called their attention, made a joke about his appearance, then took off. His look? Yeah, he's got these bunny ears. Izuku was instantly depressed. He muttered to himself as he walked into class, they're not bunny ears. Until the teacher arrived, the class was still talking about the new vigilante, and the rest of the day was dull until lunchtime. When the principal summoned him to his office, where 2 policemen were standing by. Mioriya Izuku. The lead officer asked sternly. Why yes sir, Izuku stammered, instantly frightened. Did they discover me so fast? You're not in trouble, easy, son. We simply wanted to stop by and inquire about your rivals. See competitors? Izuku inquired bewilderedly. You're the Izuku Midoriya who took first place in the local archery tournament, correct? The other officer inquired. Why yes sir, he nodded to confirm. Then, are you aware of your division's other top shooters? Just passing by? Are you aware of anyone with the necessary skills to act as a vigilante? After a few seconds, Izuku tilted his head sideways and said, Pardon me? With timidity, he asked. Are there any of your peers that you know of who might act as vigilantes? They're calling him the Jade Rabbit. The officer repeated, ignoring Izuku's flinch at the name, as the other took out a newspaper and gave it to him. His aim is precise, and the arrows he uses are all specialized, he said, pointing to a picture of him standing on the roof with lights shining on everything but his domino mask-covered eyes hidden under the cowl of his hood. We do know that he is young, but we also suspect that he has an accuracy quirk. We thought you'd be the best person to gain some insider knowledge because there are only so many archers in Japan, and you're at most your age group. With a nervous swallow, Izuku said, Am I no longer a suspect? In an attempt to hide his identity, he asked naively. Yes, a peculiar child acting as a vigilante. Izuku became somewhat deflated when the officer sneered, You're talented, but not that talented. Well, as far as I know, none of my competitors want to be heroes, Izuku replied as he returned the paper. Why Yakamura-senpai made a comment about being a hero once, but he wasn't very serious when he said it, and kind of stupid, probably wouldn't be able to make those kinds of arrows. The officer shook his hand and said, Well, thank you for your assistance, son. You're truly making Shizuka proud because you continue to win those competitions, quirkless or not. Izuku stammered out, Thank you, sir, his smile brightening, but it vanished as soon as he turned the corner. Quirkless or not, it's good but not that good, making Shizuka proud. His smile came back a little. But they won't look at me as a suspect, not seriously anyways. I can do this, he muttered, glaring out the window. Even when they're praising me, they're still dismissive. After 2 weeks, Izuku was lying on his rooftop, his costume smoking a little from his encounter with a carjacker who had a blowtorch quirk. I can't do this, he moaned. It had irritated me. He moaned as he made himself sit up, asking himself, why hadn't I considered this earlier? Apparently the knockout gas is flammable, so I'll have to fix that. He was quick enough to avoid my taser arrows, and he set my boxing glove arrows on fire. I only have those 3 arrows. Why is that? I forgot to account for all types of quirks. He groaned in frustration as he fell back. He sat up again and began scrawling frantically in the pages of his notebook. I have to work on arrows for fire extinguishers. The idea should be the same as with gas arrows, but we should consider other trick arrows that will add some diversity to a battle. After all, I can't be a one-trick pony, so now is the perfect moment to start learning new skills before I become stagnant. With the right deployment system in place, the possibilities are virtually limitless. Bolo arrows that explode to tangle someone's feet, capture nets that I can electrify if necessary, and even some arrows that I don't have to shoot in order to use. Like one with an acetylene torch in case I'm caught. That seems like a lot of labor. Izuku will always maintain that he didn't scream so loudly before spinning around with an arrow pointed at a blonde girl who was at least a year older than him. She was grinning broadly, utterly unfazed by the arrow pointed at her chest, and only moved the box beneath her arm to put it in the path of the arrow. Who are you? Wincing when his voice broke at the end, he demanded to know. Don't be concerned. I am your friend. Holding the box out, she chirped. I thought you'd need more equipment, and it wasn't that difficult to figure out who you were, Midoriya. Izuku wilted a little. He was apprehended. Ne would never reach Ua and would be arrested for vigilantism. Wait. You mentioned having equipment for me, right? Izuku finally relaxed his bow and asked. I thought you'd need a wider variety of arrows after I saw your fight with the brick guy, so I got right to work on it, she said with a joyful nod, placing the box down in front of him. Izuku opened the box carefully and was shocked to discover a number of new arrows. Net arrows and bolas are a smart idea, but I thought the fire extinguisher was simple. Additionally, I included a rebound arrow to shoot around corners and some heavier arrows for rock quirks. To get this right, some practice would be necessary. Wait, stop, hold on. Who are you? Still on edge about who this girl was, he nearly demanded to know. She chuckled. You're right. With her hands on her hips, she assumed an exaggerated stance and said, Don't worry. You're in good hands now for all of your engineering and gadget-making needs. Because my name is Mighty Tech 0001. Another name for Melissa Shield. And I'll be the woman behind the computer for you. As he trudged home, Izuku sighed. Today had been more difficult than usual, with Bakugo resuming his bullying to ensure that Izuku didn't misunderstand the vigilante's news. Due to his nightly activities, he was fairly accustomed to the minor beating that resulted from this. Realizing that he could easily destroy Bakugo's backup in a straight fight and that he had gained experience, he had played the passive, obedient nerd who couldn't bring himself to defend himself. He was also almost positive that he would be able to defeat Bakugo with the right arrow. Hello. Izuku let out a manly scream once more as he was taken aback by his new sore spot, Melissa Shield. Would you mind sending me a message? My heart can't handle any more surprises, he said wearily. She hummed, barely controlling the skip in her step. Wow, you're like a lot more of a wimp than I thought you'd be. Have you given what I said any thought? You're going to need new equipment if you want to. She halted as she was abruptly shoved into an alleyway, an irate Izuku abruptly abandoning the mild-mannered, submissive boy routine he had been employing. Are you really that dumb to discuss it publicly like that? In case you haven't noticed, I'm walking on a razor's edge here, and there are a lot of people on that street who wouldn't have the slightest doubt about turning my ass in for a 50 yen finder's fee. He snapped, pushing her farther down the alleyway as he looked around in paranoia. Well, perhaps I wouldn't have to if you would respond to my emails rather than merely lurking and reading them repeatedly. With all traces of happiness gone, she retorted, I'm trying to help. I don't require assistance, Izuku exclaimed somewhat hysterically. I've been doing great by myself for the past few weeks. Really? Were you aware that certain malicious organizations were already attempting to use your radio account to track your address? Or the fact that Hero Commission sleuths were tracking down some of your posts to see who sent them, she insisted. He asked, perplexed. Or the reality that government organizations were pinging your phone location? How about the fact that I've had to spread misleading information to multiple online investigators who were only 5 posts away from identifying you? She went on. He leaned back against the wall slowly and murmured, No, I did not know any of that. What do you want? Weary, he asked. Melissa sighed and leaned against the wall next to him, saying, Wow, you're depressing. What gives you the impression that I want anything? Izuku complained, When you're quirkless, you discover that people only interact with you when they need something. So what is it? It can't be homework. You're intelligent enough to do that without my assistance. In fact, I'm fairly certain that you're in a more advanced course than I am. So you want me to do something as the rabbit. I detest that name. What is it? Do you want me to target a specific person? Go remove a family member that you dislike. He stopped when she deadpanned. Holy hell, you're worse than I thought. The only thing I want is to help. She continued. All I could think when I first saw your posts and those first conversations we had was, oh man, this guy is going to do it. He's going to be the first quirkless superhero in about 10 years. I felt hopeful, envious, and thrilled. I started working harder in my dreams to become a support hero because I was hopeful that you would open the path for others. You can only imagine how shocked I was to learn 5 years later that Mustafa had a new vigilante. When Izuku moaned in shame, she laughed and said, I started digging and it took me like 2 hours to figure out who you are. When I did, I immediately started damage control, blocking hackers and government agencies alike from picking up your scent and making new arrows you'd need on the street. Coincidentally, where my internet friend is from. In addition to convincing and pleading with my father to allow me to enroll in a private tech school here so that I can attend UA when I turn 15 and so that I can assist you on the down low, I already have a lot set up. So please, give me a chance? She said, holding out her hand with a hopeful expression. The three of us brainstormed together would have been sufficient for the UA entrance exam, but not for every situation on the street. After a brief moment of staring at her, Izuku sighed and shook her hand, admitting, I guess I really do need help. Excellent, she exclaimed, leaping to her feet and pulling him along the street. Let's go. What? Where? Exclaimed Izuku. To our secret hideout. We have a secret hideout? 7 p.m. Warehouse District. Izuku was shocked to discover a fully functional support lab, tables brimming with unfinished aero projects and prototypes for various bows and crossbows, and a full billboard featuring designs and sketches of a new hero uniform. Melissa exclaimed, here we are, as she threw open the enormous sliding metal door on a rundown warehouse. There was a faint hum of electricity and all the windows were blacked out. I have 4 fission generators I designed myself, to powering the lab. Melissa spoke casually as she pointed a number of items. A 3D printer with metal filament to help make arrows faster, automated prepping system to make the specialty arrows at a fraction of the time and a 4.3% more efficient blend of chemicals. Oh. And I also have a fashion assembly system and a few rolls of Kevlar and steel weave mesh that we can experiment with for a new uniform. Izuku gazed at the 4 monitors she had arranged in an arc around a rolling chair that displayed a GPS map of the city and asked in amazement, How did you set all of this up? There are green, yellow, and red dots scattered throughout the city, along with a blue dot that glows where they are. Melissa boasted, my dad set up the shop so I can have a place to practice my craft in peace. With the promise that none of my inventions are sold off to any companies without his say-so. Seeing what he was looking at, Melissa smiled and said, that's the main hub. She then took a seat and made a keyboard slide out from under the table. I've taken the liberty of cataloging all of your collars I've been able to track. Green indicates muggings, yellow indicates violent crimes, and red indicates active villains. I can also dispatch law enforcement, fire, and rescue from here. He muttered absently, you're missing a few. Then, as a sign of trust, he placed the journal in her hand and said, you should find the other 8 in there. Why would you bring this with you? She asked, excitedly opening it up. She asked incredulously, only to hum in surprise as she looked through it. Esperanto? She pondered. Izuku stated, I can give you the key, combination with Yiddish, Mandarin, Latin, and a few other dead languages, as well as a certain way of combining them that's only known to me. She put it on the table and said, no, I want to try my hand at decoding your journal. That can be what I do while you're out on patrol, so what do you think? She asked, looking back at him with a sudden sense of nervousness, that is unless you think you're better off solo? I think you've shown me the error of my ways. Izuku reluctantly replied, I didn't think about anything you did. I'm lucky you were actually on my side and not some hero association agent. Nah, those guys ain't got nothing on me, she replied confidently. Nezu was the only one I had to tread carefully around. But with him it's leaving things in plain sight and keeping him busy with some complex puzzle far away from your base of operations. I don't know what's scarier, the fact that Nezu apparently has a cyber network, or the fact that you know how to get around him. She picked up the journal and sassed, I plead the fifth. So did you learn all these languages just to code? She asked. I considered it when I first had thoughts of being a vigilante, he said, adding, I didn't learn them so much as used keywords from certain languages to help encode my work. How did you come to that conclusion? Was it after you saved me in that alley a few months ago? She inquired eagerly. I didn't save you. He trailed off, his eyes widening as he recalled the blonde girl who had knocked out the mugger after he had pinned him, that first, rash takedown. Oh my god, that was you. You're just now beginning to realize this, with disbelief, she asked. Izuku moaned and fell into a chair close by, saying, I didn't have time to commit your appearance to memory because I was afraid I would be arrested for vigilantism. You took off so quickly for that reason. At the time, I thought you were a hero or something, and I didn't think you could be bothered to stay, she cried. Yeah no, I had a panic attack. Thought I just threw everything I was working for down the drain, Izuku murmured. Well you still kind of did, she said. I mean, how are you going to apply to Ua with your bow without immediately getting found out? I figured the rabbit would die, and I could pretend like I was just inspired by him to become a hero. Izuku nodded. The cops already don't suspect me. They asked me about the other competitors in my bracket because they wouldn't believe a quirkless kid could be the rabbit. Running a hand through her hair, she grunted, which is short-sighted no matter how you look at it. It's a good plan, but you might want to learn another weapon so you can get away with it a little more. Izuku checked his phone and hummed in agreement, saying, I have to make every hour count because my mom gets off at 3 tonight, so I have to get out on the street before it's too late. She gave him a small case with a pair of stylish earbuds inside, saying, oh, before you go, here. So we can keep in contact, just call me Cyber when you do call me. I don't know how secure the channel is yet. Thank you, Izuku said earnestly. I'll check in when I'm out on the street in 2 hours. Why don't you leave now? As he began to move away, she asked. You know, I still have homework. He returned the call before vanishing through the doors. Melissa smirked as she glanced at his journal, saying, let's see just how good you are at coding. Great, what do I do for 2 hours? She trailed off. As he limbered up and called Melissa, Izuku yawned and said, Hey Cyber, it's Rabbit, just started. How the hell did you structure this? Wah? Izuku asked after pausing and blinking a little. Nothing, whatever, she snapped, what's your usual route look like? He pulled out an arrow and fired it, grabbed the end of the zip line and swung out into the night, front flipped onto the next building, and ran along the rooftops once more. I usually go cross town to Mustafa Ward shopping mall before deciding from there. Gotta say, kinda weird to have someone talking to me while I'm working. Isn't it neat? She exclaimed, having a little angel on your shoulder? She began scolding him, and he smiled and retorted, more like a devil. Excuse me sir, but I am an absolute delight. Who just found you a robbery in progress 2 blocks to the southeast? With his eyes darting around, Izuku changed direction and swung down into the street, asking, how'd you know that? Your stupid journal got frustrating so I tapped into local PD and hero channels, couldn't access the hero network that'd get us flagged almost immediately but there's some independent chatter that I can piggyback off of. Izuku asked, what's so frustrating about my journal? As he slid into a restaurant with its front windows smashed open and saw 4 men in masks robbing the establishment. Before they could even summon their quirks, he released taser arrows and sent them writhing to the ground, giving them little time to react. Before the first cruiser could turn the corner, Izuku was back out. Well first off I don't know how you even structured this stupid thing, and I can't seem to identify 2 of the languages you used. So it's a good code. He beamed. I wouldn't go that far, but it's giving me some problems to say the least. Hey, we got a high-speed chase going on between cops and a speed quirk user. Think you could stop him? Izuku jumped off the roof again and said, give me the location and I'll see what I can do. This guy was fast, Ingenium had to admit. With the contraband support gear ramping the wheels to crazy speeds, he nearly overheated his engines in an attempt to catch up to the wheel-legged man. While other units set up roadblocks to divert him down other roads, Ingenium yelled into his radio, we need to cut him off, and looked back as 2 cruisers peeled off to try and get ahead. I'm too fast for you, Ingenium, the man exclaimed, laughing as he carried heavy bags of cash over his shoulders. You'll never catch the cyclist. He snarled, bastard. He was getting ready to overclock his engines, which would likely cause his radiator to crack at this point, but he had no other option. Get ready, villain, Recipro. They chopped off Ingenium like a thwip. Bullets wrapped around his legs and sent him crashing hard onto the asphalt as he sounded out and barely skidded to a stop to avoid the cyclist. A teasing voice yelled, have a nice trip there, cyclist. One bank robber, on the run. Hey, Ingenium said, staring with wide eyes at the small archer who was crouching on a ledge and smiling as he saluted Ingenium. Why you? Rabbit in Jade. Ingenium yelled. Izuku muttered to himself, still not crazy, about the name, and then he leapt to his feet and posed. No need to thank me. I'm just fulfilling my civic obligation. You must run. Cease. For the sake of law. Ingenium ordered as he chased after the rabbit. Sadly, the verdant archer had the advantage of not being constrained to the street. He was soon out of sight. Damn it. He grumbled, restarting his radio. Ingenium to all heroes. The jade rabbit is within the vicinity. I repeat, he's in the area. When Izuku leapt from rooftop to rooftop, he thought, I think I pissed him off. Him and a few other heroes who are converging on you according to police scanners. Melissa thought, I'm feeding misinformation to keep you clear, head south towards the Detronaut building. Got reports of a couple of break-ins. Where are the reports coming from? Izuku asked as he swung through the air and landed in a roll atop an apartment complex. He jumped when the nearby roof door slammed open, and two men wearing ski masks skidded to a stop when they discovered a bewildered archer staring back at them. Never mind, found them. Pulling a gun and firing at the young vigilante, who effortlessly rolled out of the way, one yelled, Shit, it's the rabbit. Get him. Two arrows were ready and flying when his foot was planted, and they both exploded into boxing gloves that smashed viciously into their jaws, knocking both of them unconscious. As he restrained the two, Izuku snorted, A gun? Really? What is this 2005? Hey Cyber, you got anything else? Nothing in your immediate area, but listen to this. The police have been having to deal with some new drug traffickers in the area, pretty hard stuff too, including trigger and some narcotics that would be a junkie's dream. As police cruisers circled the building, Izuku stepped off the roof and asked, And you know this, how? Oh, I hacked the police files and database, peeked in on what a detective Tsukachi was looking into. After swinging up onto one of the taller buildings and using it as a springboard to land on a lower roof, he asked incredulously, You're just, casually, hacking police systems? Before tumbling and jumping back up onto the next roof. Gotta find something for you to do, get your name up on the board you know? And taking down drug dealers is the way to do it? You want to twiddle your thumbs for the rest of the night or do you want to get something accomplished? He sighed and paused on the next rooftop, saying, Yeah, all right. Maybe we can make a collar or two, add it to the book. How is that going by the way? He murmured. Laugh it up bunny boy, it won't be a code for long. Detective Naomasa Tsukachi entered the dilapidated warehouse where scores of police officers were gathered, some guarding the unconscious criminals scattered throughout, while others were gathering evidence from smashed crates containing cash, weapons, and various types of drugs. What do we have? Tsukachi asked, walking up to the on-duty sergeant. The sergeant led him past the wounded thugs, some of whom were still pinned to the wall by arrows, and said, A bunch of guys from the local triad were trying to move all this across Japan. Tsukachi exclaimed, The rabbit again? This is the fourth drug bust that he's beaten us to. The sergeant grunted and pointed a flashlight towards a broken window up in the rafters, saying, We got here in time to see him bouncing around firing off arrows. He disappeared through there and booked it as soon as we breached. Kamui Woods went after him, but I doubt he'll catch him, the rabbit's a wily one. Tsukachi whispered, You sound like you admire him. He turned off the flashlight and shrugged, saying, What can I say? Guy cleans up nice. And it's true, 2 months of him being on the street and not one person's been able to catch him, he said. That's gonna change. Surprised, the two officers looked up again to see a familiar face kneeling on the rafters, peering through his yellow goggles at a ripped piece of fabric. As the pro-hero lowered himself to their sides and lowered his goggles to show weary eyes, Tsukachi greeted him. Eraserhead. Figured this would catch your attention sooner or later. Eraserhead looked at the contraband and said, Anything missing among the deliveries? As far as we can tell, all the crates are full to capacity. The officer responded, Nothing's missing, just like always. For example, Tsukachi asked, What are you thinking? As Kamui swung into the warehouse, he looked up and said, I thought the rabbit was trying to steal from the triads, but that's not what he's doing. Lost him? He asked. Kamui paced agitatedly and growled, He snuck away again. How does he keep evading us? Kamui asked. More than likely he's using a police scanner to track our movements. Eraserhead stated, looking back at Tsukachi. From now on any mention of a hero chasing Jade Rabbit needs to only be conveyed over the hero network. We can't risk him using the police radios against us. He must be a veritable genius to be able to use a few seconds of warning to get away so fast, the officer grumbled. Melissa yelled, What do you mean you slipped and fell into a jello factory? As she gazed at the red-covered Izuku, who was trying to extract the last of the juice from his hair. His now red-stained uniform was in a sopping pile on the ground, and he was wearing shorts and an undershirt that were also dripping wet and deeply red. What was that about? Izuku spluttered, trying to wipe the water from his eyes, as Melissa struck him with a water hose. I mean, someone left a skylight unlocked, and I landed on it while running from Kamui Woods. Luckily he didn't see me fall, otherwise I'd have been captured HRK. Melissa laughed and threw a towel at him, striking him in the face, saying, "You would have been sticky if I didn't. Dry off. I stocked up on some clothes your size in case something like this happened." With a pitiful sigh, Izuku dried off and hurried into the bathroom to change completely in the clothes Melissa had given him. "Thanks." Melissa yelled through the door as she returned to making new arrows. "You know, they'll probably catch on pretty soon that we're using the police radio to track them. You'll need to get better at evading the heroes or we'll both be in hot water." Izuku stepped out wearing gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt with a bow and arrow on it and said, "I figure if I start using the sewers I might be able to get away faster. And, really? Regarding the design? Hey, Jade Rabbit merchandise is really becoming more popular. You'll blend in perfectly on the train ride home," she defended herself. Looking at his uniform, Izuku sighed once more and complained, "I have no idea if I'll be able to clean that." She gathered up the still wet items and tossed them into a nearby basket, laughing, saying, "Don't worry, I can take care of that, but we can also use this opportunity to upgrade your costume. We can eliminate the bulky Kevlar vest and sweater, replace them with a bodysuit with a Kevlar, steel weave. It'll be a little heavier because of the steel, but it'll keep you better protected from attacks of all kinds." Flippantly, Izuku grabbed his bag and left, saying, "Shouldn't be a problem, though I'd rather it not be a jumpsuit. You coming? In 15 minutes, the final train departs. In order to prepare you for tomorrow, I'm working through the night." She gave a haughty cheer. Izuku said anxiously, "Don't put yourself through unnecessary stress just to help. I could take a day off. Please, I have the week off before classes resume. After I finish, I'll get some rest. Go. That train would be too good to miss." After a moment of hesitation, Izuku nodded and said, "Thank you Cyber, for everything." He then left the warehouse, leaving Melissa beaming with joy as she went to work. "Must be nice having a week off," Izuku whispered. As more and more rumors started to circulate about the Jade Rabbit, including the possibility that the Green Vigilante might not have any peculiarities, it had been another difficult day. No one wanted little Izuku Midoriya to develop any grandiose illusions. If a bright white scooter hadn't drifted into a parking space next to him as he was leaving, they most likely would have followed him home. "Hi, Izuku." Melissa exclaimed happily as she pulled her helmet off, pushing her tangled blonde hair out of her way as she waved him over. "Hurry up. We need to do a lot of testing." Right." Izuku laughed uneasily and approached, ignoring the shocked and perplexed expressions he was receiving from everyone. "Congratulations." She handed him a simple black helmet with faint green stripes and said. He looked at the helmet and thought sadly, "Really? Rabbit ears?" He sighed and put it on before climbing onto the back of the scooter. She smirked and put her helmet back on, saying, "Better hold on." Whoa, hold on," Izuku yelped as she suddenly took off, his arms instinctively going around her stomach as they took off. Hold on, have you got a license?" "With this much horsepower, a license is unnecessary." Melissa laughed as she revved the engine and sped along the road, dodging other vehicles. "I believe this to be against the law." As they sped through the town, Izuku cried and tightly closed his eyes. "What will you do, Rabbit? Take me into custody. I was doing some snooping last night," she said, slowing their pace so they could converse. It turns out that these floodways pass through the majority of Mustafu and neighboring prefects. Most of it underground so you can avoid being seen, not to mention with these being fairly straight shots with split-offs you should be able to reach other towns and cities to widen your operating sphere. She made fun of them as she swerved through traffic and hit a small overgrown bike trail just off the road that led into some foliage and then back into a large concrete floodway, about 2 car lengths across. Since you're only keeping it in Mustafu and the few towns you can get to by train, the heroes can't be pursuing you. "In one night, how will I manage to get to other prefects and back?" Izuku asked, peeking over her shoulder as she snorted, "You know I'm not All Might." She complained and then seemed to get excited as she led them up a small dirt road a block from their warehouse and out of the floodway. "I worked on a mode of transportation last night. The fabricator will finish your uniform in time for patrol tonight, giving you time to practice," she said. "What do you practice?" As they cautiously pulled into the warehouse, Izuku asked, his eyes widening when he noticed a green and black dirt bike next to the work table. The bike was a little bulkier than a normal dirt bike, but it looked like it was ready to go. There was just one issue. When Melissa stopped, Izuku jumped off the scooter and declared, I have no idea how to ride a bike. Melissa reassured him, it's not that hard, comparing it to riding a pedal bike, but without pedaling and with a 500 horsepower engine between your legs that is powered by an industrial-grade battery engine that charges as you drive. Izuku acknowledged, yeah. Pedal bike, never learned how to ride that one either. Gazing at the bicycle. How did you not learn how to ride a bike? Melissa shrieked, that's a crime. It's like an American rite of passage. Helpfully, Izuku pointed out, I'm not American. She demanded to know, semantics. How have you never learned to ride a bike? Well, riding bikes is kind of what you do with friends, and I never really had any. Well, it's a good thing you have a super helpful, smart, and beautiful friend who will help you learn how to ride this baby, said Melissa, who winced at that but quickly got back up. He yelled, what the hell, as she held up the small arrowhead with 2 taser prongs sticking out slightly in front of the point. And who is that again? Izuku teased, jumping when she gave him a quick jab in the side, sending a tiny jolt of electricity up his spine. New taser heads. She innocently replied, can be set from minor annoyance to knockout. Now, let's get to riding. After a few hours, Izuku was able to ride the bike with assurance and without braking too soon. The bike was surprisingly sturdy, and there were no more jerky brakes or attempts to get off it. 2 hours later, Izuku and Melissa were speeding through the hallways, talking on a headset as they passed the access tunnels that would lead to different wards and prefectures. As they made their way back to their base, she informed him, you won't be able to go to multiple places in one night, but you'll at least be able to go to different prefectures every night, keep the cops and heroes guessing. When Melissa laughed at his slightly bow-legged waltz, Izuku glared at her and asked, where are we going first? Before jumping off and attempting to stretch out his cramped limbs as he pulled into the main base. I say you head to Saitama. Word on the street is Mirko is hitting Hosu to try and find you, be the best place to be. Izuku muttered nervously, that sounds like it'd make her mad, maybe we shouldn't make her mad. As Melissa checked on the fabricator, she said dismissively, please, she won't catch you. She smiled when she pulled out a finished collection of clothes and grunted, here, ya, go, before throwing the finished clothes to Izuku, who grunted at the weight. As he adjusted to the weight, he nodded to himself and grudgingly said, barely more than the plate carrier I used. Melissa gave him a smug smile. She boasted, the program should have optimized it so you shouldn't feel much of a difference. A little more weight for your arms and legs, but it's distributed well. As Melissa logged into her desktop, Izuku said, well, let's put it on, see how it goes. She then went to the restroom. I got a new software in, we should be on a completely secure channel, keep with code names though. She cautioned that radio waves aren't 100% secure, there's always a chance we'll still be picked up by independent radios. As Izuku stepped outside, he said, you got it, Cyber. He flipped his rabbit-eared cowl over his head, concealing his eyes and domino mask under shadows. He turned left and right, nodding at how easily he could do so without the hood falling back or bunching up. He was pleased with the dark green and gray highlights of the skin-tight suit and the relative ease of his movement. As he looked down at it critically, he said, it's a jumpsuit. He shook his leg a little, enjoying the dark emerald utility belt and the slightly bagginess of the legs. The boots were the same, which he appreciated, and the hood remained in place even after he performed a few flips and rolls to ensure it would stay. As her programs started up, she noticed what he was testing and said, there's a magnet in the cowl that keeps it near the domino mask. As her eyes darted between her 2 screens, she saw that it also keeps the hood down when you pull it off. As he mounted the bike, he grabbed his quiver and bow and praised her, saying, this is great. Saitama, right? 3rd tunnel to the left? He asked. Yep, she said, smiling at him, go out there and see what you can find, because there isn't any new triad intelligence. Izuku boasted as he revved his new bike's engine, I'll clean up Saitama by 1:30. He then sped out of the warehouse and into the tunnels, barely paying attention as he made the right turns down the right tunnels. Keep me posted on police movement when you can. Police haven't even responded to this one yet. We got a run and gun downtown Saitama. They stole 3 ATMs and are currently evading the likes of Smile Man and the Tick, so how about let's steal this robbery from them? What's the location? Izuku asked, smiling as he roared the engine and sped through the floodgates at a never-before-seen pace. As he leapt after the ATM robbers, the Tick laughed and said, ATMs are a bitch to break into. His strong legs allowed him to jump as far as Mirko, but the force of his blows left much to be desired. You'd think these guys would hit an easier mark, he said to Smile Man, who was keeping up with his basic strength-enhancing quirk with ease. As he attempted to catch up, Smile Man snarled, swerving between and over cars and saying, "If we don't catch them they'll make it off with it, still a lot of money." When a dirt bike abruptly cut him off, Tick yelled, "Don't worry, we'll catch up soon, what the hell." With a rev of the engine, the bike took off, effortlessly outspacing Smile Man and the surrounding cars as it swerved in and out of traffic. Smile Man asked bewilderedly, "The Jade Rabbit?" The outfit was a little different, but there was no denying the bow he pulled taut as he drove past the fugitives in their 4x4 truck, or the ears flapping in the wind behind him. The truck was thrown across the street and collided with the guardrail of a particularly steep bend after the two front tires exploded due to a well-placed arrow. When Jade Rabbit ran through downtown, the fading shout, "You're welcome," came before Tick even slowed down enough to apprehend the robbers. Tick yelled, "Radio in Smile," as he seized the leader. One of the grunts attempted to use a rebound quirk against him, but he repelled the blow and struggled with the man, slamming him to the ground while putting handcuffs on him. The vigilante made a sharp right turn and vanished before he could catch up. "Where did he? The rabbit has disappeared. I repeat, the rabbit has disappeared. All available heroes converge on his last known location," she said, blinking. "This is Smile Man in Saitama. I have eyes on Jade Rabbit heading north in downtown Saitama." After hitting an access point into the flood canals, Rabbit leapt through a number of hilly tunnels and said into his headset, "We should start live streaming this. Scratch one group of bank robbers." Cyber scolded him, saying, "That's a good way to catch a rabbit. Just be happy you're helping. Fame and fortune can come after Ua." Rabbit laughed as he walked out into one of the main streets, bouncing in and out of traffic while keeping his eyes open, searching for any crime to stop. "It's not about the fame and fortune, Cyber. It's all about helping." "Right, that's why you've barely cracked down on the Jade Rabbit merch. You know it's illegal for corporations to use your copyrighted name and badge without paying, right?" As he merged onto the freeway, Izuku muttered, "Nothing I have is copyrighted." 5 police cruisers were pursuing a Dodge Charger, which was easily outpacing the cruisers in speed and maneuverability. "I don't have a badge either." As Izuku swerved past the first responders, quickly catching up to the escaping muscle car, Cyber boasted, "Oh, it's copyrighted, I made sure. I'll take it to court in 6 months, so long as I file your taxes while we do this. We have a case." "Oh, you're facing quirkless thugs, by the way. Big corporate heist of Detronaut." Izuku muttered, "Lots of that lately." He pressed the boost on his bike and sped ahead. With another switch flip, 2 arrows blasted out of tubes mounted on the side of his main headlight, striking the back wheels and briefly losing control before he straightened out his trajectory and sent sparks into the midnight sky. "I'm already looking into Detronaut to see what we can find, but their encryption is as bad as UA's, might take me a while." As he struck a particularly steep incline that sent him flying into the air over the Dodge Charger, Rabbit grunted, "Take all the time you need." With deft timing, he aimed a taser arrow at the driver and let it fly before his front tire even touched the ground. Before the police arrested the now crash victims of the Charger, he had already been 3 blocks away. There have been too many targeted hits on Detronaut to not investigate, especially now that they're trying to break into the support gear game. "Doesn't sit right with me," the officers said. "Agreed. They're way too invested in the quirk superiority theory than I'm comfortable with." Cyber concurred, "Until I get some concrete evidence. There's been a reported serial mugger in the area. He targets lone civilians who don't look like they'll fight back in May Park. Think you can get there before Vector?" "Is the Pope Catholic?" he asked with a laugh as he revved the engine once more and drove through the town carelessly. The following day, Ua High School. Shota Aizawa didn't see why apprehending a lone adolescent vigilante was so difficult. This possibly 15-year-old had the drive of a top 10 in arrests and cases closed, and the skills of a top 50 professional, if the reports were to be believed. According to eyewitness accounts, the rabbit was a clumsy, goofy character who shouldn't have survived his first week of appearance. One of their first eyewitnesses claimed that he had crashed into the alleyway wall during his escape, but it was too dark to be certain. Some of the best minds in the Hero Association had yet to catch him on and off the streets, despite Death Arms and Backdraft swearing that he had unintentionally revealed his position above them after stopping 3 armed robbers of a downtown bodega. As Shota strode into the meeting room, the UA principal laughed and said, "Ah, Aizawa, it's good you've joined us." Shota eyed the dozen or so underground heroes that ringed the table. Some of them didn't even have names. They preferred the unknown to instill fear in the lowlifes of their towns. They're all here to assist in combating Jade Rabbit, the vigilante. As he pressed a button, a holographic display came to life, displaying the few images they had of the rabbit leaping between rooftops and the one video they had of one of his initial takedowns, where he posed atop the tallest building in the area and declared himself more of a Midwestern hare. Principal Nezu said, "Now, you all know why you're here. The Jade Rabbit has gained a certain notoriety amongst the populace in the last 2 months. His work is mostly clean. One of the heroes idly, Aizawa believes, he's yet to cross the same lines Stendhal did. Nor is he hitting the high-profile targets, he's keeping himself to small fry drug dealers and crime of opportunity. He hasn't even tried to steal the spotlight like so many others." A rat-faced hero shot back, his whiskers quivering as if considering what he had said. "That's what makes him dangerous. He's out there taking targets at random, who knows if he'll suddenly switch targets from villains to heroes." From his seat close to the head of the table, Snipe muttered, "I doubt it's that serious. As far as we can tell, he wants to catch criminals. Nothing else suggests otherwise." Man-Bat shot back, flapping his wings agitatedly, "It's very likely he's doing this as revenge. He's been hitting a specific triad when he can." When Aizawa asked, "Revenge for what?" everyone turned to face him. If his target was revenge, then I doubt he'd be going after these small-time criminals. He'd keep his focus completely on the triad. With others around him muttering in agitated agreement, Man-Bat sneered, "So you suggest we just ignore the blatant targeting?" With his hands clasped on the table in front of him, Aizawa sighed wearily and said, "I didn't say that. The fact of the matter is, we don't know what his drive is. Until we do, anything we guess is hearsay." Nezu inquired inquisitively, "What do you propose to change this, Eraser?" "I propose we begin sending out heroes with the specific mission of smoking out this Jade Rabbit," the weary man said. "For the last 2 months he's been alternating where he begins and ends his patrols. Always within a bus ride of Mustafu. Last night he was sighted in Saitama. Twice the distance he usually travels. If we don't stop this soon, we may just lose him in the countryside when he decides to go to ground." "And how will we decide where we begin our search?" X-Les asked with his chin protruding. "You said it yourself. Our search goes from Saitama to Mustafu and the surrounding areas in between. How do we narrow that down?" One of the unidentified heroes said, scratching at his coyote-like muzzle, "We concentrate our efforts there. We put a few scouts on the lesser hit areas and we keep monitoring until someone gets a hit. After that we start increasing our numbers until we can intercept him. It's a long scam, but it might work. We station one of us at each hot spot." "Best idea we've had so far," Man-Bat grumbled. "We'll have to be careful. The Triad is actively hunting for the rabbit. They might try and piggyback off our operation if we move too obviously." Jabbing a thumb at his chest, X-Les said, "Leave that to me. I got some contact in moles that can throw out some false information. Keep the Triad from figuring us out at least." Nezu interrupted, "We keep all communication on a strictly secured and encoded channel. We know they've been monitoring the police radio, so it's best to add another layer of protection in case they decide to hack the hero network," Nezu said. "They?" Aizawa asked, glancing at his boss, a rodent. Indeed, the rabbit's sudden change after his first 2 weeks in both cybersecurity and his physical patrols suggests he's found a partner to help organize and encode his work. Nezu sighed, "He isn't like your typical vigilante that's easy to find online and even easier to take down. The rabbit is very much a capable opponent, and if we're not careful he may just slip through our fingers no matter how tightly woven the trap is." Providence was consumed by hellfire, and not a soul would make it out alive. The tiny group of motorcycles that left the now ghost town behind, stopping far out in the desert where no poor person could happen to pass them, was the only sign that a town had once existed where the smoldering ruins now stood. "We fulfilled our part of the bargain. Providence is burned," one of the riders said sternly, his face obscured by the midnight moon's shadow as others joined him. "Feds are gonna be on our trail soon enough. You received your retribution." "Not yet." A weary voice rasped, from a wiry man whose face was obscured by his wide-brimmed hat, with only the twin revolvers shining dully in the moonlight. "If I want my revenge, true revenge," he said. "Providence was only a small part of the cancer. I have to go to the land of the rising sun after that." "You'll do it without us. We put our necks out far enough already," the rider grunted. With a grunt, the vagrant switched on his bike and said, "And I'm grateful. Tell no one of my intentions, I'll know if you didn't." And with that, he was gone, roaring through the desert with no worries at all. As the lead rider watched the man vanish into the desert and continued to keep watch long after he had left and the campfires had reduced to smoldering heaps of ash, he muttered, "Good luck, Slinger." He wanted to show them what hellfire really is. He's hit 4 more warehouses this month, that's 12 altogether. This damned rabbit is costing us men, money, and supplies. We need to bring in an exterminator, someone who can take care of the damned rodent. Is Double Down still under contract with us? Yes, he ought to be sufficient to handle this child. With a great deal of bias. It's all garbage, 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 garbage. As Izuku roared through the streets, swerving through traffic and taking narrow alleyways in blind terror, he repeated this word repeatedly. What was the cause of his fear? Bunny boy. Get back here. I'll teach you to try and be a vigilante in my hometown, snarled Mirko, who was running right behind him and only prevented him from grabbing him by his erratic driving. You weren't present. I assumed you required assistance, Izuku shouted in response. As she watched his progress on both her monitor and another that showed a news helicopter filming the chase, Melissa said in a conversational tone, maybe don't antagonize the number 5 hero. Oh hey. You made headlines in Juzo. I'm not interested in that at the moment. Midoriya cried as he revved his engine, hitting a straightaway that let him hit the bike's max speed. He risked a glance back and almost began crying when he saw Mirko not only keep up, but slowly begin to catch up. Shit. She's gaining. What do I do? Center right button on your dash. When 2 arrows were launched from slightly above the she-tail light, Izuku pressed the button with haste and a smile. They burst in midair, releasing bullets that swiftly wrapped the hero up and sent her flying into the street. After him, she growled, when I get my hands on you you're finished brat, which made Izuku chuckle. He snarled back, banking hard into a small alleyway and following it all the way to the secret bike trail before entering the floodways. If you catch me, he said. The 4th night in a row that a hero has nearly caught me, he sighed, leaning back and slowing his pace. Perhaps we should lay low for a bit. They're cracking down for sure, but we can't go to ground just because of a little heat, Melissa roared. Besides, until tonight you handled it pretty well. Izuku said with a hint of pride, I did, didn't I? I can't go to any of the towns where I've been active because they'll probably have a hero or 2 waiting for me. Okay, so maybe going to ground isn't the best idea. Melissa said slowly, there's already a vigilante group operating out of Naruhata, so we should avoid it. Additionally, they will most likely object to you intruding on their territory. Although Okinawa has some drive, there aren't any well-known heroes there that could compete with you. As he entered a new tunnel and emerged into the warehouse, he remarked, I think you're giving me too much credit. Most heroes could catch me if I wasn't so fast on the bike, he said. And you have me to thank for that, she confidently said, leaping from her computer and approaching. That thing can go over 400 miles an hour. I think only the top 20 can keep up with you. As the tick pursued me last month instead of Smile Man, I would have been caught, Izuku countered, pushing off his hood and carefully taking off his domino mask. There are several top 100 that could keep up. Yes, but he didn't, and only Maruko and Kamui have come close to it. Izuku muttered as he went to get his belongings and grabbed his extra change of clothes, but we shouldn't get arrogant just because the heroes haven't caught up. What's causing your bad mood? With worried eyebrows, she said, you've been snippy all day. Sorry, Izuku mumbled, nervously raking a hand through his hair. I've been feeling on edge all week, and I don't know why, he said. With some sympathy, she remarked, maybe you do need a day off. You've been going out nearly every night for the past 4 months since you started. You know what? Weekend day patrols. I retracted. The remainder of the weekend is off for you, she said, causing Izuku to blink. This weekend, weren't we meant to go sit on a possible triad purchase? He inquired. The following weekend. You can relax the following weekend, he laughed as she cheered. He said, okay, sounds good, and went to the restroom to change. Hey, maybe you could play the rabbit while I'm on break. It would at least confuse the heroes. She laughed and sneered, yeah right. I'm support. I may be physically fit, but I'm not nearly as prepared for combat as you are. He said dismissively through the door, oh come on, anyone can do what I do. You've hit 99% of all the targets you've aimed at. She deadpanned. That 1% are the ones that didn't stick, or were destroyed before hitting the target. As Izuku walked back out wearing blue jeans and a green t-shirt with the kanji for orange written on it, he remarked, I'm sure I've missed more than that. All right, she said, rolling her eyes. Anyway, according to intelligence, the triad should be moving on Friday night. Are you prepared to take a short break? When she threw his journal at his chest, he grunted, oh yeah, sitting on the desk as she returned to her computer. I got my Hulu updated, some snacks, Camelback to keep hydrated. The impact of the thick sheath of papers actually took his breath away. When he opened the journal, she smirked and said, you're only allowed to be a smartass with the heroes and the villains. He raised an eyebrow at the key she had made for his code. You figured it out? I'm impressed, he asked. Yes, it didn't even take me that long, she pretended, I finished it tonight. They both smiled before Izuku put his journal in the bag and said, I'll see you tomorrow night. Mom thinks I'm staying overnight at a competition. Oh no, only about 3 months, he said with an eye roll, putting the journal aside. But, congratulations. Shouldn't she confirm by calling the school? Melissa frowned as she asked. Nah, even if she does, the coach will probably just say, oh yeah, he's there. And nothing else, he doesn't even know when my competitions are. Izuku laughed as she sighed, too bad we can't go after villains like him. Hey, it's helping me avoid suspicion. In any case, Melissa, have a great evening. After saying that, he left. Melissa grinned as she started to secure the hideout, unlatch safety bars, and push desks and monitors into the ground with solid metal shutters to keep them out of sight. She didn't conceal everything, though. She had a number of personal projects out as cover in case her father or, God forbid, All Might, dropped in unexpectedly, and she had an emergency button that would instantly drop the rabbits' hardware into their secret caverns. Before beginning her projects, she stretched and went to reheat her dinner in the microwave. The following day Katsuki Bakugo was aware of Deku's intentions. The last few months had been unusually joyful for the snotty nerd, and even after being roughed up a few months ago, he had maintained that enragedly bright smile. On a shabby electric scooter, no less, that blonde girl had picked him up outside the school one day. Who would be foolish enough to go out with Deku of all people? He had made multiple attempts to follow the idiot in order to voice his opinions, but the wimp would always evade him before he could do so. He was going to be on Deku's ass like flies on shit today, though, and he wouldn't let the jerk leave until he gave an explanation. And there he was, running out of the school toward a low spot in the wall separating it from the park with a little hop in his step. He leapt over, but Bakugo instantly stiff-armed him, sending him tumbling to the ground. What the Bakugo? The fuck did I do now? Izuku spluttered as he stood up again, avoiding the boy's attempt to grab him. Instead of sounding frightened or intimidated, as he had done the last time they had a confrontation, he sounded irritated with him, as though he had better things to do. Fuck that. Boom. Before Bakugo caught him by the front of his shirt and pulled him back, Izuku grunted as he was thrown back against the wall and almost fell over it again. Deku. What the devil did you say to me? You've been growing too big for your britches, so it's time I showed you where you belong. Bakugo growled in his face. The annoyance in Deku's eyes before it was replaced by compliance caused his ire to rise. Please, Bakugo. I have somewhere to be. Can't you do this tomorrow? Bakugo's ire rose in response to the boy's plea, closed his fist, and swung, landing the blow on his chin. He started to say, what the fuck so I care, but Izuku stabbed him hard in the throat, killing the words. His grip relaxed as he choked on his breath, and there was no chance of getting it back when Izuku pushed his elbow into his sternum, forcing all the air out of his lungs and flipping him over so his nose would meet Izuku's driving knee. Crack. Bakugo's face exploded with pain as he fell onto his back, but he was unable to scream in agony because of the combination the nerd had just used on him. Shit, didn't mean to go that far. He tried to jump at the worthless fuck after hearing those words, but Deku slammed the sole of his foot into his chest, sending him back to the ground with a cracking sound and a bloom of pain in his chest. Stay down. His Deku couldn't hope to compete with him, he was destined to be his punching bag forever. That icy, authoritative tone didn't fit his version of Deku, who cried and begged for his life whenever he even glanced at him. Deku wasn't here. Where had he learned those moves, and how had he trained them so well to get the jump on Katsuki? This Deku stood tall after the blows he took, indifferent to the small amount of blood dripping from his nose, and all too willing and able to injure Katsuki back. I'm done being your punching bag, and I'm through letting you think you have any power over me. Deku said firmly, shaking Bakugo out of his reverie, and the next time you use your quirk on me, I'm gonna break your arm. He took a few steps back and took his foot off his chest. That's a promise, not a threat. The oddball boy vanished with that. After a few moments, Katsuki stood up, clutching his ribs and cleaning blood from his mouth and broken nose while he peered farther into the forest where Deku had vanished. Bakugo would not leave this question unanswered. The nerd could not have been that well trained without assistance, without concealing something, and he was going to discover what it was. He was indifferent to Deku's perceived advantages or the assistance he had received. That oddball fuck would learn that Bakugo was nothing special. Izuku dismissed his anxious thoughts about Bakugo, telling himself, poorly, if he had any say in the matter, that Bakugo would heed his warning. However, the boy was not one to let things go, and he knew that if Bakugo had his way, he would hear from the explosive blonde soon. He pushed these ideas to the back of his mind and focused on his mission, ignoring them. "Are you prepared?" As he entered their hiding place and started to remove his jacket in order to make his way to the alcove where his equipment was kept, Melissa inquired. He said softly, "As I'll ever be. East Naruhata, correct?" Melissa eyed him and said, "Their warehouse district, yes." If his tense shoulders and glare were any indication, something was wrong with him. "Are you okay?" Pulling on his uniform, he said quickly, "Fine. Do we have intelligence on their manpower?" Melissa carefully told him, "Guns and some low-level B ranks." She wanted to press him to tell him what was wrong, but she couldn't because of this crucial mission that was approaching. "There's talk of an A rank," Melissa said. "Thus, you must exercise caution." The Jade Rabbit grinned and said, "Of course," putting on his domino mask and pulling up the hood. He then turned to face Cyber and smiled reassuringly, saying, "I'll be back by midnight, with another drug bust under my belt." As she took her place at the command center, Cyber grinned and said, "You better, if not, she would tell your mother and ground you. Haven't even met her and you're already on her side." He slung himself onto his bike and sighed in a fake exasperation, saying, "Doesn't surprise me, honestly, she's a pretty convincing woman." Using a tearful, sulky tone, she teased, "I doubt she'd condone what I've been doing with you. I'm helping to corrupt your poor innocent soul." As he roared into the tunnel, his headset crackling to life, he sneered, "You had nothing to do with that. That was gone long before you came around." And who was involved in educating the Jade Rabbit about life's perils? Cyber. Who should we report to the police for tainting a helpless cinnamon roll? A roll of cinnamon? Offended, Izuku said, "Pardon me, ma'am, but I'm not cinnamon roll." "Please," Cyber grumbled, "even the villains know you're way too nice for your own good. We may need to work on that if we want to continue this for more than a year." He argued, winding his way through the maze-like tunnels he had committed to memory months earlier. "If anything, I've been pretty tough on them. I haven't held back against any villain yet." "No doubt you're effective and non-biased with villains," she reluctantly agreed, "and your attitude with villains gives a devil-may-care attitude, but your actual personality with the citizens as a whole is a sarcastic cinnamon roll." Rabbit complained angrily, "I'm not a cinnamon roll," as he deflated on his bike. "Keep telling yourself that, bunny boy." Cyber laughed, "We all know the truth. Next right tunnel by the way." As he cautiously navigated through the deserted concrete waterway, he said, "I know," before launching down a slightly smaller tunnel and emerging into an open floodway. His headlight went out and the engine noise reduced to hardly more than a whistle, going stealth mode. He then swerved through traffic before launching down an alleyway that appeared to be abandoned. "Are you sure it's just guns and B ranks? I'm getting a bad feeling." "But trust your gut, a little caution never hurt anyone," she said, citing all available information. Izuku pulled into a dry, musty alcove between two buildings that was just big enough for him to fit past the walls and his bike. "I'll go from foot here," he said, making his way swiftly up the wall's side and across the roofs until he reached an old warehouse. He stood next to an old clock tower that hadn't been in use for a very long time, and he said, bowing out and looking around. "Settle in, there's no telling when they'll move," Cyber said, adding, "I'll listen for anything." After 4 hours, Rabbit played a game on his phone out of boredom. He moved back and forth across the platform like game, shooting generic bad guys until he got the last one to move on. When his watch struck the hour, he asked, "Anything, Cyber?" "So far, nothing has happened. It's eerily quiet for something like this. Typically, we hear conversations from the police or some of the villain channels. However, everyone seems to have gone home." He put his phone up and looked out into the area again, scanning the pipes and walkways that extended out of the warehouse. "Maybe we finally started scaring the," he said, bending backwards and his eyes wide as a hypersonic playing card cut a lock of his green hair as it sped past his head. He grunted and threw himself over the edge of the tower as 2 grenades flew into the room he had been in. An explosion sent debris flying and forced him to the ground, barely slowing down as he used pipes and the wall to slow his descent. "What's up, Rabbit? Your heart rate just went up." A few more cards landed where he had, most of them stabbing into the walls and concrete, but some were able to cut his arms and leg. Cyber asked anxiously as the rabbit rolled to his feet and vaulted away. As he backflipped away from another grenade and landed behind the warehouse, Izuku yelled, "Someone's attacking." "Some kind of accuracy quirk, I think, not a good one, but he's getting close," he said. "Any injuries?" Cyber inquired, preparing to summon the police. As he drew an arrow and aimed it at the wall next to him, Rabbit exclaimed, "Couple of scratches, I'll live." The arrow leapt off and into the air, where it burst into a brilliant flash of light. Sharp eyes scanned the maze of pipes and walkways before losing an arrow, and he rolled out of his cover, a few cards flying past his head as he stopped on his knees. Having already lost his opponent, he snarled, "Usually you triads wait until I'm in the warehouse to attack. Bad form." A figure leapt from where he shot, forcing the young vigilante to flee and shoot more arrows at his opponent. The adversary skillfully avoided the danger and eventually dove into an alleyway, knocking an arrow as he peered around the corner. A mocking voice yelled, "Plans change. They sent Double Down in because the trio is done dealing with you." Izuku shot a couple of grenades that were flying in his direction out of the air. He used the explosions as cover as he ran out, sending gas arrows in his direction, but his enemy jumped out of his hiding place before the arrows could release their toxic gases. After a few more cards sliced through his costume, cutting the flesh around his stomach and ribs, Rabbit gasped and fled into the warehouse, hiding behind an old piece of machinery and saying, "Cyber, he's got me off foot, I need to get out of here." Cyber yelled, "Police and heroes are 10 minutes from your location, get out of there, Rabbit." And he leapt out of the window once more, heading into an alley. As he continued, he tucked and rolled occasionally as more cards landed around him, screaming as something shot through his side, splattering blood on the concrete. "Damn it," he snapped, backflipping and losing 3 arrows at the height of his jump, and he heard a cry as one of the taser arrows connected and took off again. He grunted as another card pierced his leg, sending him tumbling to the ground as he finally saw his opponent. He was trembling slightly from the electrical shock. His brown eyes narrowed dangerously as the young vigilante knocked an arrow, and every inch of his body was tattooed with playing cards. Only one hand was free of them, and his fingers clutched a handful as they appeared. As he strode toward him, stroking his free hand through his startling red hair, Double Down sneered, "I'm getting paid to take you out, about time if you ask me. Who needs some shitty vigilante throwing a wrench into all their plans? I'm not in the mood for this right now, kid." "That's the best part about this job," Rabbit retorted, standing and pulling his back string as Double Down launched his volley of cards. The man was flung backwards as 3 of the 7 cards pierced his body, 2 of which went through his other legs and 1 through his chest, sending him sprawling. The explosive arrow he had selected exploded at the man's feet. As Izuku dragged himself out of the alley, Cyber yelled, "Rabbit! You need to get out of there now, heroes are closing in, Rabbit! Rabbit!" Izuku did not turn to look back in time to see Double Down stumble away while gripping his dangling arm. Rabbit gulped before collapsing once more. I'll be on the bike, soon," he said, forcing himself to roll onto his back, his eyesight blurry, darkness creeping in at the edge of his vision as he gazed up at the empty night sky. "A rabbit, Rabbit, come on in, oh no, Izuku, answer." A crow was approaching him, the last thing he saw before the darkness took over. "A rabbit?" Melissa demanded. She was standing at her station, fear and anxiety running through her when she didn't get a return. "Come in, Rabbit." "Oh no, Izuku. Answer, Izuku." She received nothing but static and started to pace, her fear replaced by worry as she bit her lip. What do I do? What do I do? I can't go get him myself. The heroes will arrest him, his life will be over. But if I don't think of anything, he'll die. Damn it, why didn't we plan for this?" She chastised herself for failing to come up with a plan for rescue. She practically pleaded into the comms, "Please, answer me." It was so quiet that Melissa thought she might burst into tears. Then there was a crackle over the line, and it wasn't Izuku. "Hello?" a rough voice said. "Where's Rabbit?" she demanded. "Who is this?" The cool response was, "I've gotten him out of immediate danger, and he's unconscious." She gripped the edge of her seat until her knuckles turned white, demanding to know again, "Who are you?" The cautious response was, "A friend. Where must I take him?" Melissa hesitated because she didn't want to reveal their hiding place to a stranger, and this was unfamiliar territory. She had to get Rabbit help, though, because he was in trouble. She started slowly, saying, "I can have the autopilot bring him to me if you can get him to his cycle. You'll have to hurry, heroes will be there any minute. I've seen a few pass overhead. Can you make the cycle meet me somewhere? Once the heat's died down a bit." "Non-negotiable. I don't even know if I can trust you," she snarled. "You'll have to, or we'll be caught." Melissa bit her lip while she considered her options for a moment before turning the communications back on. "Get him somewhere safe," she said, her voice trembling, "and I'll send the cycle once it's clear." After hearing the response, revelry in the dark, everything fell silent, leaving Melissa to question whether she had just given her friend over to the enemy. Fumikage Tokiyami carefully wrapped his jacket around the unconscious boy while glancing at the bleeding vigilante. The crow-headed boy grunted as he got to his feet, his quirk Dark Shadow reaching out his own arms to support the weight, and vowed, "On my honor and service to the dark, I will save you, rabbit. Do not worry." After his brief altercation with the rabbit, Double Down desperately needed a place to stay, and he staggered into the Triad safe house, a dilapidated apartment with the bare necessities. His left arm was dislocated from his awkward landing, and he was covered in cuts and bruises from the explosive arrow. He put it back in place with a hiss as he started preparing his bandages. He watched idly as the cards he had thrown started to reappear on his skin. Kid had me using cards from my chest. He should be dead after that barrage, but I should definitely make sure. He had just finished tending to his wounds and had taken a water bottle out of the dirty refrigerator in the room's corner when his phone rang. "What?" he asked. The rough voice on the other voice asked, "Is it done?" I winged him several times. "He left bloody. No idea if he's dead though," he said lightly. The line growled and gulped down water. "You said he'd be dead. If I don't see his damn corpse in the news I'll not pay me, I know." He grinned and said, "Relax, I'm just patching myself up. As you know, this kid's no pushover. He got me a couple of times too, and I plan on paying that back. Call as soon as it's done. Don't fail us, Double Down." "Fucking Triad pieces of shit." Double Down complained. "I miss the Yakuza." He took a pack of cigarettes out of his pockets and lit one as he made his way to the door. "I hope you've said your prayers, kid, because this time it's personal." The line went dead, and he fought the urge to throw his phone against the wall. Shota Aizawa observed the forensic officers collecting evidence from the old warehouse. Arrows were stabbed into the ground and walls throughout the building, and the thin puncture marks indicated a strong long-range quirk. If the blood splattering through the nearby alleyway was any indication, it had struck its target multiple times. As the detective approached, he asked Naomasa, "What have you found?" "Nothing much. Any CCTV nearby was corrupted. Triad most likely. Got signs of explosives used. Grenades is what one of the forensic guys said. We know Rabbit also has some explosive arrows as well." Returning her attention to the blood, Shota muttered, "Looks like he finally bit off more than he could chew." "There's no telling right now," Naomasa said with a sigh. "We have officers combing the area. They found more traces of blood, but nothing that could be followed. Samples are being sent to the lab. Hopefully we'll hear something within a few hours." Aizawa whispered, "I doubt he's in the system, but at least we'll have it on file." "My thoughts exactly. For now the boys are gonna wrap up here. Leave a patrol unit in the area. If anything else happens, we'll know." Izuku awoke with a gasp, which soon evolved into a moan as the pain stabbed through his body, causing him to roll onto his side and vomit. A soft, elderly voice said, "Easy, you're not fully healed yet." After taking a few deep breaths, Izuku cautiously looked up and was shocked to see an elderly man sitting across from him, calmly closing his eyes and caressing his Fu Manchu mustache. With his hands raised in a conciliatory gesture, he said, "I'm actually surprised you woke up during the healing process. Most don't." He was wearing plain white robes. "Where?" he began, reaching up to check his mask and hood, then letting go when he saw that they were in place. As he led him back down onto the mat he had been lying on in the center of what appeared to be a dojo, he said, "Somewhere safe, rest assured. And don't worry, we didn't peek at your identity, your secret is still safe." Izuku muttered, "Thank you for helping me and for keeping my secret." "It's no worry, young man, now relax, I still have some to go, if that pain in your chest wasn't a giveaway." Izuku whimpered at the slight pain and laughed feebly. As he placed the old man's hands on the wounded vigilante's chest, they started to glow a gentle blue. Izuku sighed in satisfaction as the throbbing light appeared to ease his irritated injuries. "How long was I out?" he inquired. "A couple of hours. Luckily Fumikage got you here before you lost any more blood. A good meal after this and you'll be good to go." "Fumikage?" he inquired. "My grandson is the one who carried you here. He was out thinking about the darkness when he saw your battle. And reassured your significant other that you were secure." "Dude, Cyber." He began to raise his arm, but the sudden, intense pain caused him to lower it again. "Don't worry about that right now," the elderly man reprimanded, "because my healing will help you get back on your feet, but you must avoid aggravating your body. Fumikage has already informed her of our location, so I'm sure your transportation will be provided as soon as you're all well. Otherwise, you run the risk of reopening wounds and delaying my work." "Am I capable of fighting?" After calling, "Enter," he continued, "I'd recommend you not do anything strenuous for the next week, if not two, but I know you hero types." I'd prefer you didn't, he said, not being distracted by a knock at the door. What am I supposed to say? He turned to the boy, startled to see a crow's head rather than a typical human one, and said, sorry about that. He laughed feebly as someone started to clean up his vomit. I don't hold it against you, Rabbit, the boy said in a deep, dramatic voice. Your wounds were grievous. Are you Fumikage? Thank you for saving me. I don't know what I would have done, Izuku said, giving the boy a sincere smile. The closest one could manage in his worn-out state, when he nodded. Fumikage lowered his head slightly and said, it was my honor. It was the least I could do since you have done so much for those who suffer in the dark. Before the boy could push him back, a shadowy bird suddenly appeared from under his shirt and snickered, saying, that's Fumi talk for he's a big fan. Dark Shadow, the boy yelled. The elderly man grinned and said, I'll be done in about half an hour. Why don't you go get some food for our friend here, grandson? Before departing, Fumikage bowed to his elder and said, yes, grandfather. The old man looked at Izuku and remarked, he's a good boy. He hopes to be accepted at UA in 2 years. UA is a good aspiration. It is one you should consider, especially after tonight. After lying quietly for a while, Izuku muttered, I can't. A few inches to the right and that attack would have sliced through your heart, the elderly man said gravely and sternly, you nearly died tonight, young man. Izuku tried, I can't stop after everything I've done. Of course you can, the world isn't hurting for heroes, you're young, the hero's life can wait for you when you graduate from an accredited school. Is that the reason these triad men have been able to roam around freely with so few people pursuing them? Izuku asked, barely managing to keep his annoyance from showing in his quiet voice. And the solution is a single 13-year-old. Give what you've gathered to the police and retire until you've graduated, the elderly man said, giving him a disinterested look. How do you think your loved ones would have felt if you had passed away tonight, if not for your own life, then for theirs? If you weren't brought here in time by Fumi? For the remainder of the healing session, Izuku remained silent and stood motionless until the elderly man moved aside and gave Izuku a nod that meant he was okay now. He nodded, stretched this way and that, and threw a few experimental jabs. He was tired, but he was still able to move. He mutely said, thank you, with a courteous bow. The elderly man placed his hand on his shoulder and said, I'm not trying to discourage you, son. He said softly, I just want you to know that you have other options and that you've done a lot of good at great personal risk. Wouldn't it be better to stop now that you have a way out? Tonight, the rabbit could easily die. Let your true self continue. Before Izuku could respond, the door opened once more, and Fumikage came in with a plate of onigiri, which he described as the best I could come up with at this hour. Izuku said, reaching for the food, thank you. The old man patted his shoulder and walked away, saying, I'm going to bed, Fumi, make sure to lock up after our guest. Regain your strength, and think on my words. When the elderly man left them alone, Fumikage said, of course, grandfather. As Izuku took a seat and began to eat the onigiri, Fumikage leaned against the wall and said, without glancing at Izuku, grandfather is only speaking from a place of worry. I know. Izuku said, he must have had a heart attack when you brought me in. Izuku looked up at him sharply and Fumikage quickly reassured him, saying, he never turns anyone away, but he cannot stay silent when he feels he must speak up. He won't divulge your secret. He will take it to his grave if required, but he wouldn't let you leave here without first speaking his mind, Fumikage said. Izuku let out a sigh. It's not like he's wrong. Izuku murmured reluctantly, me and Cyber have talked about how the Jade Rabbit ends. But the longer I'm out on the streets, the more I face villains and come out on top, the more I think. Do I really need to stop? Do I need to go to a hero school when I'm doing what the majority of heroes are? Even now, I'm not thinking about how close I came to death. I'm thinking about how to counter that assassin I faced. Where I could lure him to put the odds in my favor, which arrows would incapacitate him the fastest so I can truss him up and leave him on the street with a note to the cops. He sighed, I didn't even think how my family would react had I not made it home. Fumikage asked thoughtfully, may I ask what led you to become a vigilante? Because I wanted to help. Izuku simply replied, because I wanted to be a hero since I was 3. It was never a question what I would do, what I would become. Becoming the Jade Rabbit was a spur-of-the-moment decision, but now that I'm here, I can't even imagine quitting just like that. Nodded Fumikage, the choice is yours in the end, just know that vigilante or hero student I support you. Izuku laughed when Dark Shadow gave him a thumbs up from under the shirt and said, yeah, you kick ass. After finishing his meal, Izuku got up and said, thanks Fumi, for what it's worth. I hope we run into each other again after tonight. He could already hear his bike's sound before it switched to silent running mode. With a humorous tone, Fumikage handed over his earpieces and said, "I hope I don't have to save you again tonight." As he made his way to the door, Izuku said, "Don't worry about me," laughing. "This rabbit's figured out the best burrow to blitz for this time." He opened the back door as the bike silently rolled to a stop in the alleyway, saying, "Thank you again." Then he got on the bike and started to ride off, asking, "Cyber, you there?" He winced as he struggled to control the bike and swerved slightly in response to the exclamation, "About time. That old guy said it'd take a bit to heal you, but I thought he'd give you the headset when you were done. Seriously." "Don't be too hard on the guy," Izuku said sheepishly. "He had some things to say. We'll talk about it when I get back. For now, you know any way to find this card-throwing guy? Other than going back to the scene of the crime where I'm sure there's a few patrol units nearby to report anything, I'd say your best bet is to go the old-fashioned route." Izuku looked thoughtfully at his phone and said, "Old-fashioned, huh?" Double Down was unsure of how he would locate that brat. He had been searching for almost 2 hours, jumping from rooftop to rooftop while his arm ached, looking around for the wily rabbit. He took out his phone when it vibrated, his eyes narrowing at the text message his boss had sent him. "He's still alive." It was a screenshot of Twitter with the handle, "The Real Jade Rabbit," and a selfie of the Green Archer from his bike, smiling and flinging a peace sign at the screen. The caption read, "Some assassin jerk tried to get me, but you can't keep this rabbit down. He's taunting me." "Me?" he growled, his jaw tightening around the phone as its case cracked slightly. Double Down smiled as he glanced back at the phone after receiving another message. Another screenshot, this one showing a passerby photographing himself leaping into a building site. As he flew across the rooftops, Double Down exclaimed, "Keep it up, you little shit, all it's doing is helping me get to you." Twitter? Really? As he stalked through the building with his taser arrow knocked and ready, Izuku muttered, "Hey, it's the fastest way to get the word out. What, did you want me to drive through the center of town shouting, 'Look at me. I'm here. This way, I got time to set up an ambush'? You don't even know if he'll come, no way." Izuku tensed a little and said, "What?" "Some intrepid blogger has entered the building, they're on the first floor." Izuku slammed his hand over his mouth and cried, "What?" Cyber mockingly remarked, "And that's why you don't telegraph your location on Twitter, thank you for playing." Yeah, I'll take care of it." Two girls cautiously made their way down the first floor's deserted hallways, the first one holding up her phone as she ran a commentary about how she had ended up stalking the still under construction building. She chattered excitedly, "And then I saw him dive into one of the open windows, so he has to be here." As she looked back at her purple-haired friend, her snake-like hair, red, real snakes, writhing around her head with excitement. Her yellow-tinted nighttime sunglasses glinted a little. "Maybe we can get an interview with the rabbit Kyo," she said. With her jacks tapping against her portable speaker, the shorter punk girl said sharply, "Interviewing is your thing. I'm here to make sure you're not in over your head. Why would he even come here? Who knows? Maybe this is his secret lair. This place hasn't had actual construction in years after all," she said with enthusiasm. "Maybe, bit too obvious though, isn't it? I'd say." While her friend turned her phone's light up to the top of them, where the Jade Rabbit was standing tall, Kyo's jack plugged into her speaker and she held it up toward the top of the nearby staircase. The new voice made both girls jump. "A little too open air, for my tastes, don't you think?" "Holy shit," Kyo softly said. "Mr. Rabbit, do you have a moment to talk?" her friend exclaimed as she charged forward, slamming her foot against the stairway. Kyo barely prevented her from face-planting, her eyes widening as she saw an arrow fly past her head. "What the hell?" she yelled, throwing her friend to the ground and screaming as a sharp object sliced past her calf. "Is the rabbit attacking us?" Kyo exclaimed. As they both sat up, her friend attempted to yell, "No, it's," but was interrupted when the rabbit threw them into a nearby room, leaving the area where they had just been filled with a flurry of sharp playing cards. The rabbit quickly rolled off of them and leapt to his feet, directing the girls to stand while launching a flashbang arrow into the hallway. "Hello, Jade Rabbit, big fan. I know you are, I'll sign something later, now run," Rabbit commanded. As Double Down charged into the room, the rabbit lunged at him with his bow on his back. He bobbed and weaved between punches and card-throwing to land a powerful right cross on the villain's jaw. "Yeah right. This would be great for my ratings," the snake-haired girl said, dismissing him with her phone back up and recording. Kyoka was barely able to hold the phone steady as her friend started dragging her away. "Hey!" the girl cried as Kyoka tackled her once more. "Kyoka! You're getting in the way of the shot." Kyoka snarled as she finally leveled her speaker at Double Down, saying, "Fuck your shot." She shoved her friend aside as the rabbit put his arm around the villain's neck and flipped him, flinging him against the wall between the two girls. Eat Soundwave Asswipe. Kyoka turned on the speaker and sent a powerful wave of reverb into the side of the distracted villain, sending him flying back into the hallway. Izuku continued to fire arrows, another 2 concussives, a taser that was cut in half as Double Down regained his bearings, and a few regulars to take out his retaliatory volley of sharp cards. The rabbit pulled his bow once more and yelled, "Both of you, out the other hall." He leapt into the hallway and loosed an arrow at Double Down, who had just managed to get to his feet in time to eat the concussive arrow that sent him sprawling once more. Double Down was blinded by the second flashbang arrow and had to stop to frantically rub his eyes. "You're fucking dead, kid," he roared as his vision returned and he charged into the room they had previously been in. The rabbit and the 2 girls he had nearly killed were gone, and he exclaimed, "You've pissed off the triads, now you've pissed me off. Come out and die like a man. How about I run like a rabbit?" When the rabbit leapt away, Double Down spun around and summoned more cards, sending cards flying in the direction of the door. Double Down then ran after him. The rabbit taunted, "Come on, Full House, you gotta be quicker than that," as he bounded up the stairs, not even trying to shoot any more arrows, concentrating only on avoiding Double Down's enraged blows as he pursued the child, higher and higher up the partially constructed skyscraper. "We'll never catch up now." With a groan, Kyoka finally passed out next to the building in the street, her snake-haired friend pouting as she uploaded what little footage she had managed to capture of the fight. Kyoka stood back up and swore, "Medi, you nearly killed us, I'm going to choke you when we get back to my house." "No way." The rabbit had it all under control, she argued as a patrol car came roaring around the corner, lights blazing as it came to a sliding stop beside them, 2 cops jumping out and immediately leveling guns on them. "Freeze. We are citizens," Medi shouted, holding her hands up to show her phone an empty hand while Kyoka just held her empty hands up, leaving her speaker on the ground. "So uncool," she grumbled. Rabbit pulled an arrow as he heard Double descend, his breathing coming in ragged gasps, and he somersaulted over another volley as he finally reached the top of the skyscraper. The concrete pillars and half-finished walls created a veritable maze that he soon lost himself in. "You little punk. Do you find this shit funny? All you've been doing is wasting my time and annoying me," Double Down growled as he crept slowly into the makeshift labyrinth and peered around. "Is that all? I feel hurt. I thought we'd become rivals, arch enemies," Rabbit simpered said, leaping over a wall as Double Down ran around the corner and jumped a few more pillars before yelling once more, "Did you really not enjoy it as much as I did?" Double Down clenched his teeth and spat, "You're a job. A meal ticket that will allow me to get rid of those triad jerks for a few more weeks until the next one." He turned quickly and threw 12 cards that flew through the far side of the wall, grunting as a kick to the middle of his shoulder blades sent him crashing to the ground. He had already left. "I'm devastated and hurt. Oh, how will I continue knowing Ace here doesn't reciprocate?" Rabbit mockingly asked. "Once I get your hands on you, you're fucking done." Double Down growled and began hurling cards in all directions, tearing up the plywood and a few single boards that had been erected and removing dusty chips from the concrete pillars. Izuku whispered into his communications, "I was right," Rabbit said, humming as he used a small mirror to check around the corner and look at Double Down. "The cards come from the tattoos on his body. Every time he throws some, they disappear, indicating that he has a limit." Cyber retorted, "He must have been exhausted by now. SWAT is going up the stairs, and it will take them no more than 10 minutes to get to you too." After stepping around the corner and firing an arrow that Double Down was able to cut cleanly in half, Izuku muttered, "I only need 5. He then knocked 2 arrows and leapt out of cover, losing both as he rolled under the onslaught of arrows. The second one went wide, exploding on one of the pillars and releasing dozens of hard rubber bullets that ricocheted between the pillars and pummeled the villain, forcing him to cover his face from the punishing barrage. The first one turned into a net that Double Down could easily cut through. As soon as it stopped, the rabbit was on him. A backflip saved him from 5 sharp cards, one of which nicked his left eyebrow, and a strong kick to the chest propelled him through a partially destroyed wall. Double Down growled, putting up his hand to toss another deck of cards. Nowhere to run now. Not one appeared. Double Down muttered, "What?" as he looked down at his severely bruised body, which was purpling with no cards left on it. Rabbit said, "Oof, sorry buddy," as he leapt over his cover and charged at Double Down. The villain ducked under his slow punch and delivered a vicious uppercut that sent him crashing down the stairs, where SWAT had just arrived. Before Rabbit had left the building, he was dragged away in cuffs. The rabbits in the wind, I repeat, the rabbits in the wind. The SWAT captain said into his radio, "We have Class A villain Double Down in custody." He had hardly had time to park the bike before he was being thrown into a flying hug by Melissa, who was racing towards him before he had even stopped completely. After a moment, she yelled, "You jerk," and drew back to slug him with her fists. Izuku leapt away from Melissa and yelled, "Ow! Melissa! Stop, I already have enough bruises," and the old man said I'd be sore for the next few days. She slammed him in the shoulder and said, "Oh boohoo, the hero got hurt. I thought you were dead, you asshole." Wincing as she punched his arm once more, Izuku said, "If it makes you feel better, I thought so too. Ow." Before appearing to sag slightly as she gave him another hug, she spit out, "The pain means you're alive," and muttered, "Don't scare me like that again, you big dummy." The stakes had never been so clear or obvious until tonight. The possibility that he might be harmed or even killed had been an afterthought after all these months of what most agencies would consider smooth sailing. Izuku blushed but gave her a hug back. He didn't make the promise, and he knew he couldn't, and so did she, to some extent. She was certain that they both needed the night's startling return to reality. As he started to remove his uniform and made his way to where he knew there would be a change of clothes, he whispered to her, "I'm going to take off the next week." He added, "Hopefully by the end of my time off I'll be back to full. Maybe we should take a bigger break." Izuku stopped and turned to face Melissa, who appeared uncertain for the first time since they had first met. "You want to quit?" he asked softly. She said in a shaky voice, "And no, of course not. You almost died tonight, Izuku. And I froze when you didn't answer and I thought." She shook her head, raking a hand through her disheveled hair. For the first time, Izuku noticed the bags and tear stains beneath her eyes. "Maybe we tried to expand too fast," he said softly, settling into a nearby seat, "put too much pressure on the triad. Maybe we pull back, take some time off like we were talking about. That old man, he asked me when this ends. I know we've talked about when the rabbit dies. And tonight would have been the perfect time to make him so, but I couldn't." Melissa mumbled, rubbing her eyes, "And it's not like I tried telling you to come back." She rolled her eyes at Izuku's feeble joke, "Looks like both of us got bit by the hero bug." Melissa had said, "We should stop." In agreement, Izuku said, "Definitely." She sat down in her own chair and went on, "Give the police all of our evidence." Rabbit was too injured to continue, handing it over to capable heroes. Izuku replied, "Exactly, you'll go to UA in a few years, do everything right, and I'll become a great support technician, totally legal." Izuku thought, legal is good. He glanced at her, and she looked away quickly as well. "But you know," he began, a tiny smirk trembling at the corner of his lips, "it doesn't feel right, just leaving the triad for someone else." She reminded him, her own smile starting to come back, "They're dangerous." "I know, but," she looked nervous, but Melissa said, "But it would feel wrong to just leave this project half finished." There was a glint in her eyes, the same sparkle that Izuku loved to see, as she mentally started tracking the information they had on the triad. They'll go to ground now that their assassin failed. She was filing new upgrades and better tactics in her mind. Leaning back, Izuku concurred, especially after being called out so blatantly. "I'd give it a few weeks before they start operations again. It gives you time to rest and gives me time to figure out a retrieval system for if this happens again." She reached for her computer, but stopped, muttering, fidgeting in place, "No, that won't work." Then she shook her head, "I'll let you. I suggest we go home for the time being, but you know what I decide." Izuku sighed and slowly stood up, realizing only now how tired and achy he was. "Agreed," he said. "Midget needs some help." Melissa got up and rolled her eyes. She went to his side and helped him limp to the bathroom, saying, "Come on, Rabbit." She patted his shoulder and said, "I got you." It was eerily quiet in the warehouse. Dead bodies were scattered everywhere. Some were sprawled out on the concrete floor, while others were slumped over the product they had been hired to move. Their firearms were either sitting uselessly a few feet away or were held limply in their hands. The silence was broken by the sound of gunfire. As they fled to the outside world, two grunts were still alive, running through hallways and bursting through doors while occasionally firing behind them. One yelled, "Go! Go!" as he spun around, the AK-47 bursting through the door with a lethal staccato of bullets. "Eat lead, motherfucker!" he roared, gasping as one round ripped through his chest, sending him sprawling. A revolver leveled at his head was the last thing he saw. "Jesus Christ!" The last grunt gasped as he finally made it outside. He fled down the alleyway, throwing his gun into a trash can and screaming, "Fuck this. No money's worth stupid vigilante teens and fucking psycho murder arg." He cried out as a bullet went through his knee, crashed through some empty trash cans, and gripped his injured leg. He heard a man in a leather coat approach slowly, carrying a revolver, a broad-brimmed hat, and a red bandana to conceal his identity. With his hands raised in surrender, he muttered pathetically, "Come on man, I'm just a grunt." The man reloaded the cylinder with slow, audible clicks while continuing to approach him without saying anything. Each one causes the wounded grunt's heart to race with fear. He begged, "I'll do anything, come on." When the man finally arrived, he knelt next to him and asked, "Anything?" The cylinder was flicked shut, and the hammer was drawn back with 4 clicks. He nodded angrily and said, "Anything." He froze when the gun was placed against his forehead. "You're in luck," he said, slowly reaching up with his free hand to pull down the bandana before taking out a cigarette. "I need a messenger boy." He struck a match against his boot and brought it up, revealing deep scars that ran from the corner of his lip to his neck. His mismatched blue-gray eyes reflected the firelight as he lit the cigarette. "I want you to tell me what you know about the rabbit, and don't leave any details out. I'm not picky about long-winded speeches," he said. Bakugo gives the videos in front of him a fierce look. Even if he acknowledged the loser had talent, anything related to the Jade Rabbit was worth seeing. However, what was he currently observing? "Hi, Jade Rabbit, big fan. I know you are, I'll sign something later, now run." The video's unexpected quality was so good that he could practically count the freckles. However, that voice. He played the clip again after rewinding it. "Hi, Jade Rabbit." Pause, play, rewind, and repeat the pause. His fists clenched involuntarily as he slowly pieced the puzzle together, and he narrowed his eyes at the rabbit. "You son of a bitch." Tsukachi was sitting across from the 2 girls the patrolman had brought in from the rabbit incident that evening, and Aizawa peered at them through the one-way mirror while he asked questions. Nezu entered with 2 cups in his hands and inquired, "Anything of note?" He took the cup gratefully and took a quick sip of the bitter black coffee, grunting, "Nothing we didn't already know." The girl with the snake hair, Medea Auroros, figured out which building the rabbit was going to be in and immediately went in. The girl who went with her, Jiru, Kyoka, had gone to make sure her friend didn't get in any danger. They ran into the middle of a fight between Rabbit and a triad hitman. Auroros uploaded the video as soon as they left the building. And neither is aware of the rabbit's identity? Aside from stating that he is underage and that he had cute freckles, as Auroros put it, nothing noteworthy. Aizawa muttered, stroking his hair, "How did he get back on his feet in a matter of hours? The blood we found at the first battle site was enough to have been incapacitating for an underage child." With honey and sugar added to his tea, Nezu hummed, "There are many healers who don't operate within the law. It's very possible his co-conspirator was able to get him to one such healer. Still doesn't answer how he was able to not only fight double down, but win." Looking at the girls, Nezu said, "Indeed." Medea continued to look happy, but Kyoka appeared unhappy, giving Medea a few glares before rolling her eyes when her friend gave her a happy shoulder bump. "It's not many who can take out an A-class villain on their own at such a young age," Nezu said. Aizawa was just nodding as he drank his. "The blood samples we have are being passed on to a quirk doctor. Hopefully he'll be able to track just who this is from their quirk registry, and a few heroes will be doubling their nighttime patrols to try and catch him while he's injured." Nezu remarked dismissively, "That won't be necessary. Given his youth and the extent of his injuries, he will remain on the ground until he is completely recovered. Watch for the results of his blood analysis. Hopefully, he will be under our custody soon." Izuku looked up suspiciously from his dinner, sneezed, shrugged, and returned to his meal. What would motivate a child to engage in all of this? As Tsukachi left the interrogation room, Aizawa questioned, why risk his entire future to play hero? "There's a whole slew of reasons," Tsukachi said before Nezu could respond. "He could have lost a loved one to the triads. His home life could be bad to where he has an innate need to go after criminals. His family may even be in the triads with how concentrated he is on them." Nezu looked at Tsukachi and said, "All valid reasons. Did the girls say anything else?" Looking back at the room, where the girls were now arguing a little because there was no police present, Tsukachi remarked, "Nothing we didn't already know. Jiru used her quirk to protect her friend. We won't be pressing charges, but she will get a mark on her record for it. Nothing too demanding." Aizawa complained, "And I hope you told them no more intrepid reporting. Auroros has a news pass, so technically she was legal while doing this, just not very smart." Tsukachi chuckled. She has been cautioned not to attempt interviews until the police have arrived on the scene. Junior reporters. Aizawa laughed, it's a wonder more kids aren't out doing stupid things. Nezu jokingly remarked, there have been reports of a girl with spider powers snaring criminals on the other side of Tokyo, and another of a bat-wielding kid going around busting drug dealers in Okinawa. They appear to have been motivated. The rabbits started something, Sukachi said in response to Aizawa's. The boy in Okinawa is a well-known delinquent, strength quirk. Cops haven't been able to catch him because locals have been sheltering him. The girl in Tokyo was reportedly a Shiketsu hopeful until her father was killed. Not a for sure ID because we haven't been able to catch her either. Kids doing the jobs of heroes, and actually doing it well, for now. Aizawa murmured, and they're in the golden era of their run. No serious injuries save for what happened to Rabbit, that'll end sooner or later. Nezu stated solemnly, for the time being, concentrate on the boy in Okinawa, as he is the most well-known and most likely to be apprehended first. This means that we simply must capture them before their golden era ends in tragedy. We simply have to play by ear for the other two. Izuku yawned as he plodded slowly into class, ignoring the cynical jabs from Bakugo's friends as he sat down at his desk. His body still hurt from his battle with Double Down, and the healing he received had already sapped his energy. He was fortunate to have woken up in time for school after sleeping all day Sunday. He was eager for a few weeks of quiet now that he was back at school. Bakugo crushed those hopes almost immediately after entering the room. Bakugo, Izuku started, a little pleased that the boy's face was still bruised from when Izuku broke his nose. Bakugo shoved past his friends and slammed his hand into Izuku's desk. Shut up, Deku. He growled, we have some shit to discuss. After school, meet me in the forest, or I'll reveal your little secret to everyone. Izuku grinned shakily and felt a chill go down his spine. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. In the forest, he whispered softly, so softly that no other student could hear, you know exactly what I'm talking about, Rabbit. The police will know exactly what I do if you don't arrive with your kid in an hour. As the blonde bully sank into his seat, Izuku gritted his teeth to remain silent. The teacher arrived a few seconds later to start the lesson. He knew one thing, but he had no idea how Bakugo had solved it. He would now reinforce the lesson he had taught the boy just 3 days prior after telling him to back off, but the boy refused. Someone knows what you mean. Izuku, who was still in his uniform and waiting for Bakugo to arrive in a tree, winced at Melissa's high-pitched scream while holding the phone away from his ear. I mean, someone figured it out. Izuku complained wearily, pinching the bridge of his nose. He's an old friend, I'm sure he figured it out from the videos. Sarcastically, and once again, thank you for using Twitter, she complained. I'm about to take care of it, he sighed, I know. You're not going to murder him, are you? She inquired anxiously. I know I'm angry, but... No, but I can't be sure if he'll want to be dead by the time I'm done. He grumbled bitterly, we aren't friends anymore. Why don't you come by the shop after you're done? She gently suggested, I could use your help in some projects, and we could watch some old pre-Quirk movies. As he relaxed a little, Izuku grinned and said, that'd be great, I'll let you know when I'm on my way. Excellent. Cyber out, Rabbit, good luck. Izuku shut off his communication device as he scanned the forest once more and noticed Bakugo moving silently between the trees, pulling his hood up as he did so. I know you're there, Deku, so go ahead and get out. Bakugo spun around as Izuku fell from the tree directly behind him. There you are. I thought I told you to wear your kit, goddammit. He began, Bakugo, I still don't know what you're, but before he could finish, Bakugo held up his phone and played the video of him talking to the 2 girls the other day. Hey, fan of Jade Rabbit? Run now, I'll sign something later, I know you are. Faking surprise and awe, Izuku blinked and said, wow, you got a voice recording of the rabbit's voice. That's amazing back. He stopped when Bakugo grabbed him by the front of his shirt and slammed him into the nearby tree. He yelled, don't play around with me, Deku. I know that's you. Are you insane? Izuku yelped, holding his hands up placatingly. Me? A vigilante? Why would I act in such a foolish manner? Because you're a fool. Don't think I don't know how good you are with that stupid shitty bow, he growled. Did you just give me a compliment? Boom. He grunted and grabbed Bakugo's arm while he was still clenching his shirt, hooking a leg around the limb and slamming Bakugo into the ground while keeping the pinned arm pointed skyward. I told you I wouldn't be your punching bag anymore, and I warned you what would happen if you used your quirk on me. Izuku sprang to his feet, keeping his hands ready as Bakugo lunged at him. He spun around the boy's ferocious attack and drove his elbow down into his back, catching the blistering retaliatory punch at the wrist. His head tilted to the side, the heat narrowing his eyes a little as he jerked hard. Pop! Bakugo screamed in agony as Izuku dislocated his arm, then used the pain as leverage to push him onto his stomach. His arm was agonizingly stretched behind his back, and he tried to strike Izuku again with his other hand, but it was caught and strained back. Izuku then painfully held both of Bakugo's arms back while placing his foot on the small of his back. "I'm not the rabbit," Izuku said sharply, ignoring the blonde's pained growl, "and past that blip of audio you have one that doesn't even sound like me. Might I add you have no proof. So I'm going to leave, and if you try this crap again, I'm going to go through with my promise to break your arm." Izuku paused, then grimaced and pulled hard on Bakugo's other hand, getting another sickening pop. He also dislocated the arm, causing Bakugo to collapse with yet another scream of agony. With a grim expression, Izuku turned away and pushed himself to leave the forest, and from now on, leave me alone. The new pain, which Bakugo had only experienced once before when he had gone too far in training, kept him curled up on the floor for a short while. 3, 2, 1, he swore as he popped his right shoulder back into place with a hard hit against the tree, staggered back as he clenched and unclenched his fist, annoyingly shaking the pins and needles from it. He took a few deep breaths, ran at the tree, slammed his other shoulder into it, and popped it back into place. He grunted and forced himself to his feet, his arms hanging uselessly at his sides. Cradling both arms to his chest, he screamed, "Fucking shit," and forced his breath to slow through a seething hiss as he fell to his knees. Getting to his feet, he snarled, "Fucking shitty, Deku." Deku had incapacitated him even more completely this time by choking him without even trying. Had he persisted, would he have broken his arm? Would he do it again? Would he be able to afford the setback? With a shake of his head, he started to stagger out of the forest, already knowing that he would have to miss training for the next week due to the dislocations. The nerd was correct. The only other evidence he had of his identity was the cheesy voice recording, which was easily explained away. Nevertheless, he would find hard proof that he was the Jade Rabbit. He simply needed to approach it differently. He wasn't going to let that sulky nerd get ahead of him by playing the hero. He refused to let it happen. Melissa tapped her fingers on the table while she waited for Izuku to arrive. She was anxious to see if he was hurt and anxious to learn what had transpired between him and his friend. Perhaps she ought to have sent the drone. It wasn't too late, was it? Or perhaps she ought to have remained on the phone in case his old friend tried something. She could easily activate the rabbit tech even though she had locked it down for the night. She jumped when she heard a knock at the warehouse entrance. "Izuku?" she asked, leaping to her feet and walking over. "Why are you knocking?" "You never." She stopped as she opened the door to see Toshinori Yagi, her pseudo-uncle, standing there with a plastic bag in his hands, a pizza in his hands, and his best smile. "Hey kiddo," he said awkwardly. "I haven't seen you in a bit, so I figured I'd come by and make sure you were eating." Without even glancing at the pizza, she said quickly, "I am. I have a fully stocked mini-fridge." "If that's all." She attempted to shut the door, but Toshinori stopped her with a hand out. "Can we talk?" he responded, "Just real quick, I won't take any more of your time than I have to, and I brought honey barbecue wings." She gave him a fierce look before reluctantly moving aside to let him enter and view all the devices and technology she was developing. He pointed to a partially completed silvery board that was positioned next to what appeared to be generators and asked, "Is that a hoverboard?" "Yes." Distractedly, she replied, "The graviton emitters are still firing haphazardly, so I'll need to run a full diagnostic before I continue, but I'd say it'll be about a month before it's ready." He grinned sincerely and remarked, "That's amazing, your inventions never disappoint, Melissa." "What did you want to talk about?" she asked, maintaining a level voice, swallowing the joy she felt at his compliment and crossing her arms. Placing the pizza and wings on the work table, Toshi's smile softened slightly and he said, "I just wanted to know how you were doing. You haven't been coming by the apartment much." "I've been busy," she responded quickly, "lots of inventing to do before I apply to the support course at UA." He said softly, "So your ambition to go to UA is still there, I'm glad." He opened the pizza and said, "Your favorite is the mushroom and pepperoni." "Thank you, Uncle Mite." Melissa said softly as she took a slice, "I'm sorry that I haven't gone by. I'll try and stop by more from here on out." This time, she smiled, but it was a tiny one. Toshinori laughed, a little of the tension leaking out of his shoulders. "Oh, don't stress yourself on my account," he said. "I know you've been busy. Every time I blitz by on patrol you're hard at work. Though I wouldn't say no to a phone call or two, just to let your father know you're settling in well." She hesitantly said, I will, and then she asked, so what do you think about the jade rabbit? She flinched when his smile faltered. He does clean work, as far as I can tell. He started out slowly, but he definitely shouldn't be someone to emulate, vigilantism at that young of an age. I'm worried he's gonna get himself injured or worse. I hope you're not thinking of following in his footsteps. Sternly replied. I don't think David would forgive me if you wound up on the 6 o'clock news. When he raised an eyebrow at her, she muttered softly, smiling sheepishly, it wouldn't be the worst thing ever. I know, quirkless can't be heroes. She sighed, sitting down to commence eating her pizza, adding, we've had this conversation before. With a wince, Toshinori said, I'm sorry about that. She shook her head slightly and said, don't be, trying to ignore the pain in her heart as she ate a mouthful of pizza. It was wishful thinking, not like there's ever been a quirkless hero before, right? She asked bitterly, adding, and it's not like you were mean when you said it. Shaking his head, Toshinori countered, but I could have been a lot nicer about it. He stopped as the door opened. Izuku called out to them as he walked slowly to the mini fridge, hey Melissa, saying, I'm sorry, I needed a walk before I came by. Busy with inventing Toshinori asked, his frown gradually turning into a slightly playful grin as Melissa pointedly glanced down at her pizza. With a can of Coke in his hand, Izuku slowly looked over like a deer caught in headlights as his voice forced him to stand up straight. I have been. She weakly responded, this is Izuku Midoriya, he's been helping me as an assistant. Izuku waved at the skinny man and said, hi. He approached the boy and shook his hand, saying, how's it going kid, Toshinori Yagi? So, how long have you known Melissa? He asked. As he watched Melissa begin quickly to try to stop him from speaking the truth, Izuku trailed off, we've known each other for a month? Only a month and you have him helping you with your inventions? Toshinori asked, his lip quivering slightly in amusement. He turned to face Melissa, who was trying to conceal her flushed cheeks by palming her face. You don't even let your dad help you. As Melissa jumped to her feet and ushered the now laughing man out, she yelled, okay. You need to go now. Go on. Go save a cat from a tree or something. Toshinori said, all right, and walked away, laughing. I'll leave you two to your inventing, good meeting you young Midoriya. Izuku approached Melissa holding a can of Coke and said, so who was that? As she collapsed back into her chair, she moaned, my uncle. And now my dad's gonna be pestering me for who knows how long about you. Confused, he said, about me? Yep, he's gonna embellish like an old gossipy woman. She grumbled, I bet we'll be married by the time he calls him. Izuku exclaimed, married, as the can dropped from his grasp in disbelief. She punched his shoulder, blushing almost as much as he did, and yelled, and not for real you idiot. Toshi's just a damned tease. He won't pass up this chance to embarrass me and by extension you. He laughed uncomfortably and said, right. That makes way more sense. You wanted my help on something? Turning away from him, Melissa rolled her eyes and said, yeah, I wanted to reconfigure the graviton emitters on the hoverboard, and I need to run a diagnostic on the phase blaster I was making for fun. She was struggling to control her embarrassment. He questioned incredulously, you're making a phase blaster for fun? I also help a vigilante for fun, why does this surprise you? She shot deadpanned. He walked over to the computer and said, yeah, you're right. I can run the diagnostics while you work on the reconfiguration. Melissa looked over and asked, do you want to talk about what happened? You know, between you and your friend, after a moment of hesitation. It was handled, he doesn't have any real proof, and I didn't confirm anything so, Izuku shook his head and muttered, let's just get this done. Melissa opened her mouth, then hurried to switch off the terminal. She took hold of his arm and pulled him to a sofa in the room's corner, a recent addition she had made over the weekend. I thought you wanted. He paused. That can wait for tomorrow, she replied. Toshi left pizza and wings. I say we pop in some Disney movies and unwind after the hectic weekend we had. Are you sure? I can? He halted as she jumped onto the spot next to him, practically throwing him onto the couch. She firmly stated, it can wait. She patted the couch for the remote control and cheered when she found it. She then pressed a button that caused a projector to turn on and transform the distant wall into a huge screen. What do you want to watch first? She asked. After a moment of hesitation, Izuku relaxed and said, what about Treasure Planet? He hoped to see the rabbit tonight, but it was late and he hadn't been seen anywhere. Another hideout, another slaughter. Not surprisingly, given what he had heard on the Hero Network, the boy had taken a serious beating the other night. he would most likely spend a few weeks in hiding. Thus, he had a few weeks to work without any restrictions. When the triad, he was interrupted as the man's booted foot stepped hard on his shoulder, causing him to shriek in pain. "You're dead." The triad thug ground out, blood pooling beneath him from a hole the vigilante had blasted into his shoulder. "Where's Noriko?" the bandana-wearing gunslinger asked, pressing the muzzle of his revolver to the man's forehead. "I'm only going to ask once." "I don't know," he muttered. Click, the revolver's hammer slammed down on an empty cylinder, making the man flinch with a metallic sound. His eyes widened as he pulled the hammer back again, saying, "I know I still have a bullet loaded in one of these cylinders, wonder how many clicks it'll take." With tears in his eyes, the goon begged, Look man, we just move the stuff," and he winced as another click did. "I don't, we just get our orders over text. I don't," he nearly burst out in tears as the hammer fell again, another empty click, but he could see the cylinders and knew he had only one more chance. "Oh okay. Fine. I don't know where he is, but his lieutenants like to hang out at this bar in Akita Ward, Osaka. It was he blanked, trying desperately to recall as the man leaned in. His finger began to tense as he droningly said, "Tick, tock." He nearly broke down in tears as he exclaimed, It was the Crow Bar, please." Boom. The thug screamed as the bullet ripped through his ear, knocking him to the ground as he gripped the bloody wound that had once been his ear. He knew the bullet was intended for his head. However, someone had stepped in. A rough, youthful voice said, "Oi, what do you think you're doing, old man?" As he straightened out after being knocked off balance by the boy's bat swing after firing, the vigilante arched an eyebrow. The young man was wearing what appeared to be a high school uniform, with the collar popped up and unbuttoned. He had a tattered red shirt on underneath, and the metal bat he had used to deflect his shot was now resting against his shoulder as he glared at the man in front of him. He cocked his head to the side and threw loose a few dark hairs from his pompadour haircut, but he snarled, "I ain't partial to these triad asshats either. But I ain't about to let someone torture a man." The gunslinger flicked the cylinder shut and reloaded his revolver casually, asking, "And who might you be?" He let the bat fall in front of him and now held it in two hands. "Me? I'm bad," he said, "but you can call me Mel Bat. Now, are you going to walk? Or am I going to have to knock your block off?" Slinger was impressed by the boy in front of him because he was quick enough to completely deflect his bullet with a casual swipe as he charged, in addition to avoiding it. If he hadn't leapt back, his bat would have most likely sent him through a wall. Instead, two crates broke in his place. The boy fired 3 more shots, each bending toward one of the boy's limbs, and Slinger told him, "He's triad scum." Slinger was forced to dive away as Metal Bat seized a nearby metal table and hurled it at the man, causing the wrought iron to dent from the force of the bullets before continuing on. Leaning his bat against his shoulder, Metal Bat walked casually through the warehouse, watching the injured triad behind him. "I don't care about you fighting triads. I'll fuck 'em up right alongside you. But when you're in my town, you're not gonna be killing anyone else," Metal Bat called. "Go to Hokkaido with that shit." Peeking out from his cover to observe the boy strolling idly between the crates, he said, "I'm thinking you and I could come to an accord. You and I seem to be on the same side, no reason to let a difference of opinion stop what could be a good partnership. If you're going to go around dropping people, then I want no part in it." Metal Bat sneered, "I don't kill people and I don't compromise on that." Then he kicked up an empty soda can and whacked it, sending the crumpled aluminum disc flying through the group of crates Slinger was hiding behind. This forced him to jump over and fire off 2 more shots at the teenager, who swung and knocked both rounds off course. His bat returned for another swing before Slinger held his hand up, letting his guns hang from his fingers by the trigger guards. If he wanted this branch burned, he needed local vigilantes, so he said, "I'm willing to discuss terms." Both were tensing from the flashing lights of police cruisers. "How about we talk about this somewhere else?" Chambering his bat aside, Bat offered. As the doors flew open and the police poured in, he said, "Yes, let's." Both of them took off. "Stop." As they aimed their weapons at the 2 fleeing vigilantes, one yelled, "Give yourself up, Bad." He sneered, "Bite me, Nakamoto." He leapt from crate to crate toward the catwalk, with Slinger supporting him as they fled in the direction of a set of windows on the far side of the warehouse. They both flinched as bullets rang out around them, asking, "What the hell did you do that they're firing?" Slinger asked. Bad yelled, "Probably has to do with all the bodies you've dropped." His legs pounded more forcefully as he leapt, colliding with Slinger through the glass before rolling to their feet in the alley and taking off. "Anyway, what do you have against these triads?" As they ran, slipping through abandoned buildings and diving down alleyways? Bad asked. As they finally stopped, he said, let's just say I have a score to settle and leave it at that for now. Both of them took deep breaths to slow their racing hearts, and he said, I can live with not killing grunts, but their boss. The only person I won't compromise with is him. These triad bastards have gotten bold in town lately, Bad said, standing up straight and huffing, after staring at him for a few moments before slowly nodding. I can live with that, for now. Tonight, I was going to drive them away. I suppose I'm no longer required to do that. As they hunkered down to wait for the police presence to subside, Slinger droning, they'll come back. These triads are like cockroaches. They will reappear if you leave even a hint of their activity. Bad shook his head and said, I'll defend my hometown from them, but I'm not going on a drug war crusade. That ain't my fight. You've never met the rabbit? Don't worry, I'll handle that. Slinger chuckled, and I'll try not to kill anyone if you Japanese vigilantes have a problem with it. Bad shook his head and looked out the window as a cruiser passed slowly. He ducked his head as the floodlights from the car passed through the window. I'm pretty sure he's based in Shizuoka, he said, does clean work, but I've never met him. What interests you? Pulling a cigarette out and lowering his bandana, Slinger muttered, he's been hitting triad spots as well. He didn't move to light the cigarette yet, letting it hang from his chapped lips, adding, I want to find out what he knows. Bad nodded, saying, as I mentioned, he's based in Shizuoka. If you go busting up triads like you did tonight, you might be able to find him, but I'd suggest waiting. Rumor has it that Rabbit was brutally murdered in that failed assassination attempt. It has been several days since he was last seen. Guess that means I'll need to get lucky. He laughed, don't worry, I'm sure I'll find him. I doubt someone like him would get taken out that easily, or that quietly. Probably. After taking another look outside, Bad turned to face Slinger. You know, he confided, banging his bat against his boots, he's the reason I do this. I got kicked out of Ketsubetsu for my temper. Some of the blue bloods they had there didn't like me roughing them up. Before I saw that kid moving and taking down criminals, I thought I was done. He looked out once more before getting up and saying, come on, the heat should be down enough for us to slip through. Made me wonder why I was sitting at home feeling sorry for myself. As they darted between alleys again, Slinger followed, lighting his cigarette at last. Why not just try another hero school? I'm sure any number of them would take you, Slinger said as they were leaving. He sneered, no, I'm not into following rules, and why should I need a license to assist? All those well-trained and licensed heroes will definitely catch me soon if it's that important. That's the kind of attitude I can get behind, Slinger chuckled, adding, now, where can we spend the night? Bakugo refused to let him be alone. Although he hadn't physically attacked him since their argument a few days prior, the blonde continued to glare at him and follow him silently, a tactic known as stalking, in the name of observing him. One day as they were leaving school, the boy had subtly menacingly threatened, you'll slip up, and when you do you shitty Deku. He stopped at the curb as Melissa slid in on her scooter and said bluntly, I have no idea what you're talking about, Bakugo. I'm just a lowly lab assistant, trying to survive in this corporate world dominated by powerful women, he said. And later, Blondie, this strong woman has 3 projects and an essay to write. Before the irate blonde could say anything, Melissa yelled, he's still trying to find proof? As soon as Izuku sat down and fled through the streets, she inquired. Izuku moaned, practically hunching over as she walked to the warehouse. Yep, and he's refusing to give me a moment of peace until he has it. He followed me all the way to my apartment yesterday, only left because Mom tried to invite him in, Izuku said. What made her do that? In disgust, Melissa wrinkled her nose and said, I'd rather have a muddy pig in my house because at least it will be polite. Izuku laughed, she and his mom are best friends, we used to be as well until he got his quirk and decided he was better than me. One of those said Melissa, shaking her head in frustration. It was funny that his quirk didn't matter in the end when you dislocated both arms, she complained as they approached the warehouse, navigating through traffic with ease. As they eventually pulled into their hideaway, Izuku muttered, I think that's the only reason he hasn't tried that again. Izuku then leapt off and took off for the bay where their current project was still partially completed. If he wasn't being so annoying about it, I'd say we could suit up tonight, but I'm paranoid he's gonna get a picture or something. Melissa looked at her console and sighed, probably for the best. The hero's presence is still a bit elevated, and the trio is still keeping quiet. The self-driving car Melissa had started building had a carapace that was long enough to carry a prone Izuku, and its hydraulics allowed it to pick him up even if he was unconscious. With an electric engine 4 times as powerful as the one in his bike, It would easily get him to safety long before any heroes or triad hitmen could find him. Izuku hummed in agreement as he examined the carapace. Izuku wanted to retaliate by renaming it the Honey Badger, but Melissa vetoed that idea. Izuku believed that his unfortunate name had become a brand. He began to question the true leader of their superhero team. A familiar chime from the computer cut through his thoughts. "You still have my Twitter up?" Melissa sat down and launched the app as Izuku approached and asked. She showed him his profile and said, "It's secure, and you're actually pretty popular right now." Izuku moaned at the bio, which said, "I'm more of a Midwestern hare." "You had to pick my least favorite quote?" Izuku inquired. She shrugged and remarked, "It's one of the few quotes you have. And who cares anyway? The public adores it. Look," she said, "the majority of them are well wishes, which I am cataloging so you can read later, some requests to do podcasts and other such interview-type things. I figured you wouldn't want to do that, but I let them know if we even think of entertaining it, then they'll have to guarantee anonymity. And a few are requests to look into things." She clicked the Messages tab, which displayed dozens of unopened message requests. "Is there anything physical?" Izuku asked with a little too much eagerness. "Not really," Melissa replied. "A couple of them were involved in gang activity, but it was so low level one just forwarded it to the police with a note." "Would you mind telling me what you wrote on the note?" "Nothing bad," she stated. "I only let them know the source wanted to remain anonymous and that Cyber sends her regards." "I guess it's not too bad," Izuku sighed, sitting down beside the girl, laughing at the smug expression she gave him. "What's come in today?" "Well, not much. Once more, greetings and podcast requests. What's going on here, and should we wait?" When Izuku saw a set of coordinates and a request for a team-up, his eyebrow went up. "Jade Rabbit, my name is Ghost Spider, and I'm a Tokyo-based vigilante who has been following up on leads on corporate espionage involving some major players. I'm in need of support, and I can't really explain, but it seems like they have ties to your friends the Triad. We can get together here on Saturday to talk about things if you choose to work together." Ghost Spider. "Who is it?" he asked out loud. "No idea, but the coordinates are pinging on an under-construction high-rise in downtown Tokyo," Melissa said, not telling what kind of trap it is. "Could be Triad," Izuku acknowledged, "but it could also be another vigilante in need of help." "It's up to you," Melissa responded. "Until then, we could head out tonight." Izuku interrupted, saying, "Bakugo will be searching for me because he's going to suspect that I'm going out tonight." "He's gonna be looking for you anyways." Melissa remarked that, "It's not like he knows where this place is." "And if he figures it out," Izuku pondered, "if he somehow figures out how to follow the scooter and can watch the warehouse. It's a risk we'll have to take." Melissa murmured, "If you want we can wait another few days, go back to it after meeting up with this Ghost Spider." "I think that'll be the best option," Izuku responded. "Besides, we both still have homework for actual life we need to get done." Melissa laughed. "Fine, but then we work on the Jackrabbit, have to make sure if you're in danger we can get you out fast. How it'll do that from atop a skyscraper is anyone's guess." "Laugh it up now, bunny boy," Melissa laughed. "It'll do your taxes by the time I'm done with it." Inko Midoriya was aware of her son's activities. For the last 2 weeks, he had managed to return home at a respectable hour after spending the previous 5 months away virtually every evening. He was tired, pale, and extremely preoccupied. She was concerned because she was aware that she wasn't always the most encouraging when it came to his life goals. Even after he had discovered that bow and she had tentatively agreed to help him learn how to use it, she had to remind him not to get ahead of himself because he had a whole nation's worth of students to deal with and he was lacking. It wouldn't have helped, she thought. Izuku had developed a competitive and stubborn streak during his training. Her son had placed first overall at a state championship just a few months prior, and she proudly gazed at the trophy he had won. Her husband's service awards held the gilded trophy in a place of honor, and he had been riding that high for months. Even after that championship, though, her son's absence still overshadowed that. On some evenings, she discovered him coming back well past 2 in the morning. Assuring her that he would not repeat the incident, he had lost track of time training. However, it kept happening until Inko would stay up most nights until she heard him walk, and often limp, in, usually after 1, sometimes after 2, to be sure he was all right. She had a burning desire to discuss it with him, to insist on knowing what he was doing and the reason behind his prolonged delay. But for one very basic reason, her nerves let her down each and every time. Her son was content. She would like to clarify that her son was a well-adjusted young man with a goal that kept him motivated in everything he did, not that he was depressed prior to all of this. He was usually in a good mood just from training. She was aware that Izuku was being bullied at school, so it was easy to understand why it was a heavy thing, a weighed happiness that seemed conditional. Izuku was a terrible liar, and Inko was more observant than he gave her credit for. However, Izuku would clam up whenever she tried to find out whose parents she needed to yell at. Even as he was tending to the wounds and bruises from the day, he would deny that anything was amiss, even going so far as to tell her that he had never been happier. She assumed that would be the case until her child left for high school. However, things were different now. 5 months ago, her son walked with a confidence she had never seen in her son before and came home with the biggest smile she had seen since he was 5. She was astounded by the fiery determination with which the light in his eyes came alive again. She had questioned him about what had made him feel better. He had only stated that he had discovered a new training schedule and would undoubtedly be prepared for UA in 2 years. If it weren't for the late hours and the injuries he was hiding from her, she would be content to end it there. Since he had never prevented her from seeing an injury before, why start now? And the aloof stare he occasionally receives on the few occasions when he doesn't go out until the early hours of the morning. She sighed as she stared into the now empty sink and set the last plate she had been idly drying for the previous 20 minutes onto the rack with the others. Maybe I'm looking too far into it, Inko muttered as she wiped the excess water off the counter, then wrung the towel out and hung it on the edge of the sink. Izuku's a good boy, he would never do anything bad. She shook her head, turning and marching determinedly towards the living room. I'm going to trust my son, and I'm going to watch TV, she said with a little finality, turning on the television nearly simultaneously with her phone ringing. She dropped the remote and pulled her phone, then turned back on the TV as it started playing a talk show. Hello? On the other end of the line, her husband's startled voice said, Inko? I'm surprised you're awake at this hour. Good morning to you too, Hisashi, Inko said with a quiet giggle as she glanced at the clock. It was 9:34, which is later than she usually stays up, but it was still late for her husband to remember. I'm waiting on Izuku to get home. He hasn't arrived home yet? Shouldn't you be more concerned? He inquired in distress. Although Inko's smile faltered, she made an effort to sound upbeat by saying, oh, he's been staying out later these days, he's really putting his all into getting into UA. Hisashi laughed, his voice becoming a little lighter. Ah, now I get it, adding, kids are going to go far with that mindset, but remind him that rest is just as important, he doesn't need to burn himself out. Oh, I know it, Inko said with a laugh. Fortunately he still pays attention to his mother. Why are you calling now? Has something taken place? Sorta. Bossman said he needs some security help back home. He said, I won't be in Shizuoka, I'll be up in Aomori, but I'll be able to head home at least a few weekends while I'm here. Oh Hisashi, that's fantastic, exclaimed Inko. You haven't been home in a long time. Izuku will be ecstatic. She could almost hear the smile on his lips as he said, try not to spoil the surprise. I want to see his face when he walks through that door and sees me, he said. I won't. When are you relocating? I'll be back in the States in about a month, finishing up some things. It'll be nice to see you again, Coco. As her heart began to swell, Inko whispered, I know, I've missed you, Hisashi. I'll make sure to set aside a day for just us, he assured her. Until then, you two stay safe. Tell Broccoli Kid that I'm proud of him. After a few moments of waiting until the line died, she hung up, grinning to herself and saying, I will. I love you Hisashi, stay safe. Perhaps things will improve when Hisashi returns home. Still no sign of the Jade Rabbit. Looking back at the TV, Inko's eyes widened as she saw a picture of a small figure leaping between two rooftops with his bow taut and poised to drop an odd-looking arrow. The hood obscured his eyes. She had heard of the Jade Rabbit, who hadn't, but she was unaware of his diminutive size. As Inko took her seat, he announced, for those of you who are just tuning in, welcome to Hero Highlights. I am your host, Kodama Osamu, and the topic of tonight is the Jade Rabbit. The Jade Rabbit is a new addition to the small vigilante scene and is a mystery. 5 months ago, he exploded onto the scene. On his first night, he stopped 5 muggings, stopped 2 robberies, and stopped an assault that left the attacker reeling. The image changed to a video of the rabbit scuttling between cars, swerving past 2 heroes as he stopped a truck full of armed robbers before taking off down the street. As the Viridian vigilante gained notoriety, he moved on to bigger targets and bigger prey, culminating in a spectacular showdown between himself and Triad hitman Double Down, also known as Jeremy Tell, which ended with Tell in chains and the Triad routed. Since then, the rabbit has disappeared, leading many to speculate that it was hurt during the altercation with the A-class hitman. Does this imply that the rabbit's mischievous adventures may come to an end tonight? We have a scholar with a PhD in crime analysis and a focus on vigilantism who has worked with the HPSC for many years. Seta Awao, please welcome. When a man dressed in a crisp white suit emerged, the audience applauded politely. He shook hands with the host and said, "Good evening, Mr. Awao. How are you?" As the host leaned forward, Awao settled into his seat and said, "Doing very well, thank you." "All right, Seta. May I call you Seta? Since there are plenty of vigilantes wandering around from here to Akita. Seta, what makes the Jade Rabbit unique in this day and age?" "Well, Osamu, the Jade Rabbit differs in the way he operates," he said. "Many vigilantes tend to go the way of the underground hero, keeping to the shadows to limit the risk of being discovered and arrested. They want their names out of the paper, and the eyes of heroes looking at the villains and not a vigilante who may or may not have captured that person. The Jade Rabbit is special in the way he not only takes down criminals, but he does so publicly proudly even. He's been caught on video multiple times at this point and even as a Twitter account." Osamu remarked, "Yes, the real Jade Rabbit, where he broadcast a taunting message to a triad hitman. After all, why would a vigilante want to be so visible? You would think that today's heroes would apprehend a well-known and public vigilante. Many are." Seta acknowledged that the career of a vigilante is brief. Very few last more than a few months, and even fewer can last more than a year. Everyone has probably heard of Knuckleduster, who, thanks to a legal loophole, is still active in Naruhata. How is the rabbit managing to stay ahead of the manhunt, then? "Surely we have the people with the right quirk," he said. "He's a lot more resourceful than anyone gave him credit for," Seta stated, adding, "with how fast he is and the time in which he's active, the cops and heroes are hard-pressed to keep up with him. Unfortunately, this isn't a question of the right quirk. Oh yes, we all saw the video of him getting away from our number 8 hero Mirko. Word on the street is she's vowed to be the one to bring him in. And I wish her luck in that." He meant it. There is a team set up whose job it is to find him and detain him peacefully, but if the number 8 hero can do it first, then by all means. "And what about the rumors that the Jade Rabbit is an underage teen?" Inko's heart skipped a beat as she focused on the recently posted photo. This time, the hood was slightly pushed back, exposing a domino mask and freckles as he stood posed on a roof, with a flashlight shining on him against the bricks. "I wish I could say different, but yes, from the testimonies of Double Down and 2 civilians who were on the scene of their fight, we can confirm that the Jade Rabbit is underage." The implications of an underage teen fighting and defeating A-class villains caused the crowd to go crazy. Osamu exclaimed, "You're telling me, a kid who's old enough to join UA is out here matching heroes in terms of arrests?" "Yes," Seta replied with a little hesitation. "It's one of the reasons it was so hard for them to catch him in his opening months, and it's embarrassing to say that confidence has carried him through the last few months. I don't know if he'll return, but if he does, it'll be with experience few others his age have." "And what would you say to him if you could talk to him now?" "You've done good work for one so young, but it's time to leave the job to the professionals. You can join them again when you're of age," Seta said, gazing into the camera with gray eyes that seemed to pierce Inko's soul. "I'd advise him to retire while he's still in good health." Thank you very much for joining us, Seta. We'll conclude this segment with the only video known of the fight between Double Down and the Jade Rabbit, given to us by amateur reporter Medea Auroros. The idea of such a young adolescent going out to fight crime disgusted Inko, who shook her head and turned off the television. If Izuku had ever done something similar, she wasn't sure what she would do. "I recognized those freckles." As she got up and padded to the kitchen to make herself a cup of tea, Inko shook her head angrily and muttered to herself, "Getting yourself worked up by wild theories won't do you any favors, Inko." It was absurd to think that Izuku would be the Jade Rabbit, regardless of how well-known the freckles were. Izuku arrived home a few minutes later, his clothes covered in dirt and splattered with motor oil. As he wandered into the house and looked at the clock, which read 10:05, she asked, "What on earth happened to you?" Izuku pulled out some items to make himself a sandwich and sighed, saying, "I'm coming home so late, I got distracted. I was helping a friend with her projects, one of which was a car of some sort." Her son tilted his head in confusion as she teased him, "It's all right, sweetie." She then gave him a cheeky smile and asked, "So who is this friend, and why did she need your help?" "She's a friend." He repeated himself, "and she asked me for help, of course I'd help her." "And does she have a name?" Melissa." He struggled to speak. When her son appeared to understand, she smiled broadly and asked, "And does Melissa typically need your help?" With his cheeks blushing slightly, Izuku muttered softly, "She's hired me as an assistant of sorts. I'm helping her with the heavy lifting because she wants to enroll in the support course. I hope you're treating her the way I instructed you to." We can't have your girlfriend believing that I raised a brute, Inko stated, sounding stern. Oh no. Mom. Horrible. Izuku wrinkled his nose in exaggerated disgust and blanched in the manner of a 13-year-old. Melissa isn't my girlfriend. Melissa is who she is. What does that mean? She nudged. He left his sandwich on its plate and made a quick retreat, his mother's laughter trailing behind him. Well, I'm gonna go take a shower. He was distracted by a girl in her work, Inko said, shaking her head and laughing. It was nothing illegal or bad, just the usual 13-year-old fare. There was nothing to be concerned about. Since Melissa knew Toshi was in Saitama on business, she had the entire apartment to herself. In fact, she would have stayed in her workshop if she hadn't run out of clean clothes. Melissa yawned as she entered Toshinori's apartment, or her apartment. She glanced around the lovely two-bedroom apartment, which was sleek and modern and immaculate because Toshi had hired a cleaning lady. A takeout bag was sitting on the otherwise immaculate counter, with a note pinned to it. I ordered your favorite takeaway because I knew you would be hungry, kiddo. Hey Toshi, Melissa grinned as she opened the bag and took out a double cheeseburger deluxe, followed by a big order of curly fries. Her mouth was watering, so she walked over to the microwave and said to herself, "Thank you Toshi." She turned around and hummed when she noticed the answering machine's light blink red, then shrugged and pressed the button. The machine said, "You have one new message." Melissa reached for a pen and paper so she could write the message down. Hello Toshi, this is Naomasa. I wanted to speak with Melissa regarding the mugging she was a part of approximately 6 months ago. If you could give me a call back, we believe it might be related to the rabbit. Melissa quickly deleted the message, her heart pounding in her chest as she reviewed all she knew about Naomasa and his peculiarity. The microwave beeped, interrupting her thoughts. Half thinking, she walked over and took out the food, getting a soda and some ketchup for her fries and sitting down at the table. I didn't see Izuku at all when he saved me, but will that matter now that I know he's the Jade Rabbit? Will his quirk buzz on a technicality? What if I try to structure my answers to be non-answers? A part of her wanted to ignore the call and leave it on until Toshinori received another one so he could blame it on his antiquated answering machine. She knew they couldn't handle All Might. Izuku had barely escaped Mirko, and even though she liked to play up his skill, she knew it was because they had surprised her. However, wouldn't it look suspicious that it had erased it on its own? As far as she knew, it didn't have any issues that would suggest it would do so. What if Toshi was suspicious? He's probably just going to ask if I've seen him. If I stick to the truth, he won't have a reason to ask more questions, she thought as she bit into her burger and groaned at the taste. She dipped her fries in ketchup and then crunched down on them. After a few minutes, she had finished her meal and was carrying her phone as she made her way to her room. She had to warn Izuku even though she wasn't worried, and she most certainly wasn't, because it's better to be ready to bug out than to be caught off guard.
So this was the end of the series. I hope you enjoyed it. To watch more series like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, bye bye.